All right, welcome to Bold Strong. This is your host, Craig Nadeau, and today I have with me a friend of mine, Braeden Miller, who's the head coach of Miller Elite Coaching. He does lifestyle coaching, he does prep coaching, bodybuilding coaching, and really a big up-and-comer in the bodybuilding scene. Braeden has been on stage many times and now entirely focuses on getting other people up on stage and hopefully moving someone into getting into on stage on the Olympia. And it's going to be pretty exciting. I've known Braeden for some time now. Great guy, really knows his stuff. We're going to have a great conversation. And without further ado, here's Braeden. Welcome to the show, Braeden. Great to have you.
Thanks so much, Craig. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate all your kind words too.
Yeah.
I'm just a guy doing what he loves, man.
Well, I wish I could do that. Yeah. I can't.
But no, it's like I said, it's a pleasure to be here. So yeah, a little bit of background on myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fitness for me started, I was a hockey player my entire life. I played higher level hockey. I moved away at 18 to play junior hockey down in Brooks, Alberta. I had actually hired a personal trainer for getting me in shape for training camp. And that was kind of the first step for me that changed my life. I got in the best shape of my life. And I was like, wow, this guy just helped me a little bit with diet and training. Look what I can do. So my hockey continued and I ended up going and I got a scholarship to MacEwan University here in Edmonton, where I played for a few years. In my halfway through my third season, I was a captain on the team and I ended up quitting. It just felt like I was a babysitter at that point. Nobody actually cared about the hockey. They just cared about partying. And I was kind of beyond that phase of my life. So, and I was really becoming obsessed with the gym. So that's kind of where I transitioned, and I was on bodybuilding.com doing that whole thing. And I had gotten some trainer certifications myself. I started coaching some people on the side for just helping family and friends for free. And then, it just kind of snowballed. One of my best friends competed. He was actually my training partner, competed at a local show here when the ABBA and CBBF was still a thing. He did phenomenal in men's physique. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do. So from there, it kind of snowballed. I hired his coach at the time and ended up competing a year later and won a couple shows in light heavyweight division.
Wow.
Which I was completely hooked after that. So ended up getting over the span of 2 years there, I did my first Canadian nationals, kind of had a goal of just getting top 10, and we achieved that. We got 7th place, but that wasn't enough for me. I thought I would be happy with top 10 in my first national showing with light heavyweight. Light heavyweights normally big classes, and 4 of those top 10 are now pros. 4 of those.
Wow. Is that right?
Pros. Yeah. So it was a really good class. I'm not sure if you know Mahmoud Dura. And
okay. Yeah.
So I showed up backstage with Steven Didishak and Dura pumping up, and I'm like, all right, this is going to be interesting.
Wow. Yeah. No kidding. That's great.
Yeah, that's kind of where it went for me. And after that, I was fully hooked. I changed coaches after that. And that's where my progress kind of took off further. I changed my mindset with bodybuilding. It was an all-in approach for me.
Yeah.
And I got my biggest and I was my leanest. I got up to about 250 pounds. And that's when I had basically geared myself up that year. I was planning on doing the Arnold Classic and really testing the waters, because me and my coach were very confident in the package I had built previously. My off-season weight had got to about 230 and I was kind of a fat 230. Right. Whereas at this point I was about 250 pounds. I still had abs and I was a completely different bodybuilder. So unfortunately, I had some pre-existing health conditions that I really wasn't aware of, that I would have only known from getting imaging done on my heart. I had a family history of aortic issues and some heart issues. And for me, I guess the stress of obviously using PEDs combined with back squatting 500-600 pounds, deadlifting 600 pounds, walking around at 250 pounds was just a little bit too much. And I mean, everyone's quick to think it's just PEDs, but at the end of the day, I asked my cardiologists in front of my parents, did I do this to myself by doing what I did? And they said, quite frankly, you could have got hit playing hockey when you were 18 years old and split your aorta.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, I'm not ignorant to the fact it contributed, but there was a lot of other factors. So for me at that point, like I had mentioned to you previous to us recording, I went into the hospital at 250 pounds and 10 weeks later, I came out at 196 pounds, a completely changed person.
That's crazy. Yeah.
I basically died twice during that, once on the gym floor and once in the hospital.
Wow.
And it just changes your outlook on things a little bit. So for me, I had always said that I wouldn't put people on stage while I was competing, because I cared way too much in my bodybuilding to care about other people's bodybuilding when I was on stage, if that makes sense.
Sure, of course.
And I had a coach previous to some of this who basically at nationals was competing in the same show as me. And I felt the last 2 weeks he just didn't care about what I was doing. I ended up taking on my own prep. I dropped 14 pounds in 2 weeks to make weight. I wasn't able to eat on weigh-in day for 16 hours just to make weight.
Wow.
So a lot of things. And like, I knew I had what it took to be a coach, and I had the knowledge that to be okay at this, I guess.
Yeah.
But again, for me, I was an all in type person, and I didn't want to leave somebody else in the same place I had been left. But once I had to take a step back from bodybuilding, I was actually told I should never really train again. So I took a step back, and I mean, at the end of the day, you're not going to tell me I'm not going to train, because I'll just say, you know what, there's no way that's happening. This is my life. This is what I do.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, if I was to die on the gym floor just doing what I love, well, it is what it is.
Yeah, that's right.
No, so, I'm not crazy in that sense, but it's what I love, right? So
did you have the great beard?
No,
that's a pound. There's a pound right here.
COVID actually, COVID brought about this beard, and it's never left. But
that's crazy.
Yeah, so that's when I kind of really got more serious about coaching, because I knew I wasn't competing anymore, and I kind of went all in with it. And it obviously takes some time to build up your roster, and people trust you more and more. But when people see what you're doing, and you talk to people about what you have up in here, and you share that knowledge with people, it just snowballs. And the last few years I've been really blessed in terms of given opportunities, and I'm a firm believer when you get given those opportunities, you better capitalize on them, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of people who have been given a lot of opportunities, and when we're talking bodybuilding coaches and whatnot, and I mean, it's a very, very volatile industry, in the sense that if you miss an opportunity and somebody comes to you with a great physique and you completely mess that up, they might be out of your hands really quick, and that could have been one shot, right? So pretty blessed with some opportunities with some good athletes. Turned my first athlete pro in 2019.
Oh wow. Who was that?
Maverick Wright. So he's actually a coach on our team as well.
Oh, okay. Cool.
It was our first show together. We did Canadian Nationals, and we got our pro card in men's physique.
Wow, that's awesome. Do you get a mini card?
I don't get anything, but you know what, man? For me, it was I don't need anything. For me,
no, I know.
Me and Maverick hugged backstage, and we were both crying.
Yeah.
That's all I need. And I realized at that moment a pro card would be great, but getting other people pro cards is a lot cooler for me. Absolutely. Yeah. That's kind of where that journey started for me, and where we're at now. Okay. So you were in Edmonton training. What gym were you at? When my what gym were you training at in Edmonton? What gyms you've been at? I trained at Bullpen when I was kind of competing.
Oh, okay. I don't know that one.
Very, very quiet, hole in the wall bodybuilding gym that there was about 5 members only there.
Oh, wow.
But nobody showed up, and they had all the old school hammer strength equipment and stuff. So that was my sanctuary. Yeah. I was a personal trainer at that time at Good Life, and so I would basically actually leave my own gym for 2 hours at lunch break, go train, come back. And then I've bounced back and forth. I don't like commercial gyms myself, to be honest with you. So I was at Powerhouse in Edmonton, and which is now the Bar Fitness, I guess. And then I actually am currently training out of my own garage. I've built a pretty awesome gym in my garage, but I split between my garage and I go out to a private gym in Beaumont owned by Eric Kusovic, called Iron Lore. It's a private facility. He has amazing equipment, lots of pros, and a lot of my athletes are training there too. He gives me the opportunity to send my athletes there because the equipment and stuff is great. So just change of scenery for me, and a little bit different of equipment. So I train 5 days a week. I do either 2 sessions at my house or 3 there, or 3 at there and my house. That's awesome. When I grew up in Edmonton, I didn't tell you that part. Okay, right on. Yeah, but this will tell you how old I am. I was always at Club Fit. Oh yeah. Hey, well, Club Fit came back in the past couple of years. Did it really? And then they just folded again. Yeah, they were back for a couple of years. I actually trained at Club Fit right before COVID. When whole COVID was happening, I was training at Club Fit down on St. Trail there. No way. Wow. Yeah.
Old Club Fit. Well, that's cool. So here's a question for you. You've taken someone pro, and I understand that, your goal within your coaching team is that you're focused really on the highest level competitors. How do you break up your clients? And I guess one of the buried questions in there is, if someone comes to you and says, look, I love Braden, he's such a great guy, I want to train with him, but really their goal is to lose 20 or 30 pounds, or maybe they want to bench press a little more. Like, how do you break up someone who's coming to your team as a athlete?
For sure. So I'm definitely kind of moving a little bit away from the whole lifestyle side of things, just because the more athletes I get, the more these athletes are very elite competitors and stuff like that. And I mean, at the end of the day, that's where my true passion lies. Helping people is one thing, and I love helping people, but I've been doing this since 2013. And through that time, I've really realized where my real passion is and what I truly love. And it's not just general weight loss. It is competition stuff and putting people on stage. And I think I'm very, very good at it. Part of it is I have an all or nothing mentality, and I really push people hard. And a lot of the times it's tough when you have somebody who just wants to lose 15 pounds over the next 6 months. So they're pretty nonchalant with their diet, and they're messing up every other week. You know what I mean? For me, I can't wrap my head around it, because it's not who I am. And not to say that's wrong at all. I think that's how it should be. And I just don't think I'm the right guy to coach those individuals anymore, because I have a lot of people who I'm pushing hard, and then I get a check in, and it's like, XYZ, this was messed up, that was messed up, we'll have a better week next week. And it's like, okay, great, yes, you will, but we left an opportunity on the table this week. And it's really hard for me to relate to that, right? So not to say that I don't enjoy working with lifestyle athletes, and I have some lifestyle athletes still, and I always will have some on my roster, but the people that will be lifestyle athletes on my roster are ones who have very high expectations of themselves and can push themselves as hard as a competitor would. They're just not trying to step on stage, because that's what I care about. I care about elite individuals and making people elite. And at the end of the day, you don't have to step on stage to be elite. So, and that's kind of why I've built the team I have too. So we've built the team, and just this past year, we've hired on 5 amazing coaches who work under me as assistant coaches, and we teach them and kind of oversee what they do, and they bounce stuff off me and I bounce stuff off them. We're all educated enough, and we have a group of people and peers that we can run things by. So I want to help them grow as coaches too, right? So giving them opportunities, and sometimes I do have lifestyle people reach out to me, and it's just, I know it's not the greatest fit, because they want a little bit more freedom, and they want to be able to go camping with their families and have those vacations and this and that. And that's okay. That's absolutely okay, because they can reach their goals too. And I have people that can absolutely get them to those goals, and are willing to help them get there. So that's kind of where I'm at. Again, I don't want to sound like an asshole, so to speak, and that I don't work with people who are not competitors. I just want people that are willing to be all in for their goals.
Yeah, and I think you're focusing on what you're good at, which 100%. Is smart, right? Like, why wouldn't you? That's what you're good at. You should focus on it.
And like, I'm trying to avoid animosity too, right? In the sense that when I get an athlete week after week who just isn't necessarily following their plan, well, I'm not a hand holder and I'm not a babysitter. I'm going to push them hard. And at some point when I'm pushing those people who need that hand holding, they start to resent me, or vice versa, right? It becomes a relationship that just isn't successful anymore. And I don't want to put anybody in those scenarios. I want to help people. So in that situation, it's like, all right, here you go. I have an amazing coach here who will hold your hand a little bit more, where there's going to be a little bit more freedom for you. And you can still lose those 25 pounds of fat in the next 4 months. But with that being said, it's just not going to be with me. I'm on the back end. If they have questions about your health stuff, or they have questions and want me to oversee something, or you want to come to me and ask me a question, you're on this team, your family, but you're just not on my particular roster checking in with me on a weekly.
Yeah. You know what I think is interesting, and I think a lot of kind of newer people into the sport, they don't quite understand, is that, even if you're really good, even if you have been on stage, even if you have a accreditation to, be a trainer or be a sports nutritionist, everyone still uses coaches. Like 100%. Even the top people, the top people still use coaches. I think, and that's confusing to some people, because you certainly see in the industry, someone gets on stage, they lean out, and then next week they're a coach and they're taking athletes, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting. So what's your advice to someone who's heading to stage, they're not sure about getting a coach? This isn't selling it, because I totally believe in you need one, but what's the thing that we should be saying to people that are going coachless and how their experience is going to turn out?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, you're never going to give yourself an honest opinion of yourself. You're either going to go easy on yourself, or you're going to go too hard on yourself, right? And I've seen it time and time again, people over dieting themselves because they think they're not lean enough, and they think they just have to hit the gas, where a lot of the times as coach, I play governor. I'm actually pulling people back and saying, okay, we need a diet break this week because you're losing too quickly and you're going to flatten out, and all of a sudden we're going to start losing tissue, right? A second set of eyes is extremely important. And at the end of the day, I myself actually have a coach. One of my good friends out of the US, Cam Cheek, we have very similar philosophies in the way we do things. For me, I think for 100+ people. I don't want to think for myself. And I am a person who, my brain doesn't turn off. So when I'm programming for myself and I'm in the gym, all I can think about is, should I be doing this or should I be doing that movement? Well, I don't want to think. I just want to execute, right? And the more you can remove thinking, the less stress there is. The less stress there is, the lower cortisol is. The lower cortisol is, the better physique you display. Right. Now, I think having a very trusting relationship with a coach is important. So you got to ask coaches questions and see if you're a right fit beforehand. Because I'll be open and honest, I'm not the right fit for everyone. Right. But I mean, at least we have those conversations first and decide that before we really kick things off and get running. But I think it's absolutely paramount importance to have a coach. And I would go as far as to say it's important to have a coach during the off season, not just prep. I get athletes all the time that come to me and they're like, all right, time to do a prep 16 weeks out. Can you get me in shape? And half the time I say no, because I know nothing about your body. So the first 8 weeks are a learning curve for you and me. You have to learn how I program. If you've been doing high volume your entire life, and all of a sudden you get my training program, which is lower volume, and I have to teach you exercise mechanics for the first eight weeks. Your first 8 weeks are you doing a lot of thinking and learning where you're not executing the way you should be.
Right.
Secondly, you're coming to me in a position where, okay, let's get some blood work done. Oh, your blood work is completely messed up. Well, sorry, I'm not putting you on stage because that's not what I believe in. Right. So I think there's a lot of benefit to going into a contest prep season with somebody who understands your body, who's taken notes across a long period of time and knows how the body responds to things, versus just being like, okay, well, I've been working out for 4 years. I'm just going to hire a coach and do a show in 16 weeks.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I can get people in shape for that. Sure. Is it optimal? No. And does it leave things on the table where you might not be the best you could be? Absolutely. So I think, I mean, when it comes to investing in things in bodybuilding, a coach should be a primary investment, in my opinion. And that's not just because I am one. That's because every single athlete that you see succeeding in this sport has a coach, right?
So when you look at your athletes, or just athletes in general, and you're gonna, there's the natural crowd and then the enhanced crowd, is it tough to, like, is it easier to work kind of like focusing on one group or another group, or like, because there's a difference in programming and, it's a different effort required, I think, in what you as a coach have to do in those two groups, right?
Yeah. I don't think it's vastly different from my end, because I at this point, I do believe I have the knowledge to coach both very well. But with that being said, there's a lot of things that you have to pay attention to on either side, right? Like, and this might sound wild for me to say, and there's going to be a lot of people that are like, what, when I say this? I think a lot of the time, actually, natural bodybuilding can be more unhealthy than enhanced bodybuilding. And how do I say that? Well, what happens when you get to extremely low levels of body fat dieting for a competition as a natural athlete? Well, your sex hormone production drastically tanks, your thyroid production drastically tanks, right? So those things are just going to leave you in a position where it takes a lot of time to fix that, right? And being in those states for long periods of time are also very unhealthy.
Right.
And I would argue they're just as unhealthy as being in very elevated states, now not taking into account the people who just recklessly use drugs and take crazy amounts. But if PEDs are used properly, you can support the thyroid, for instance. And I actually just had a conversation with one of my athletes about this recently, educating her on this. as there's studies showing that, like, if you just diet yourself into the floor, and these studies were actually done on fitness competitors, if you diet yourself into the floor where you basically are very, very lean, your thyroid production gets shot. Now, rebounding that may take 3 to 5 months to bring your thyroid production back, which if you don't have a proper plan to do that, it can be really ugly, in the sense that, like, very high levels of body fat very quick, right? And things like that, thyroid issues, gut issues, hair issues, like there's a lot of things that can come from that. Whereas on the flip side, if you're able to actually support that thyroid with a little bit of T3 and T4 or these kind of things, there's studies showing that when you cease that T3, T4 use, the thyroid can come back in 3 to 4 weeks, right? So we're talking 3 to 5 months versus 3 to 4 weeks sometimes. And especially if you use proper supplementation and stuff, and you're able to come off of that thyroid support in the right way, in my opinion, that's just a lot healthier. Now, on the flip side, are you going to see major skews in things like cholesterols and LDLs and liver enzymes from natural athletes? A lot of the time, no, but sometimes, yeah, actually you do, right? Because as soon as all these sex hormone things pop up, there's just one thing. The entire body is a very, very efficient chain of things. And when one thing gets out of sync, a lot of other things get out of sync, right? So for instance, like you talk about, and this is something that gets talked about a bunch right now, but estrogen dominance. Well, what is a leading cause of estrogen dominance? It's just overstress in the body. And a lot of times when you see females come out of contest preps, both enhanced and natural, they start to have bad gut issues, and they start to get really, really bad estrogen dominance, in the sense of the ratio progesterone to estrogen is way off, right? And there's things you have to do to fix this. So in that sense, yeah, that might be a little different, again, natural to enhanced. But there is differences there. I think at the end of the day, the effort required from the athlete side is going to be the same no matter what. You better be going full tilt, right? Like, people think steroids are a cheat code. They're not. A lot of the time they're not. Quite frankly, if you're prepping, a lot of the time some of these steroids are going to drive appetite up, and they're going to make you, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of things that I love both. I love bodybuilding as a whole. But yeah, there are differences in terms of the end result, for sure. Because when you're pushing somebody to a level where their body doesn't want to go, and you're not using something to support the sex hormones, the thyroid, things like that, the body fights, and the body fights hard, because the body is meant to survive, right? Everything is a survival mechanism. So when you have low levels of body fat, as you're a competitor yourself in men's physique, and I'm sure at the tail end of your contest prep, when you were just peeled, I've seen the pictures of you. There was no sex drive, probably. Your brain wasn't working properly. You have the brain fog, and that's because your body is meant to survive. And it says to you, okay, this is not a state to reproduce in, because I'm trying to survive. I'm famished. I'm trying to survive. And with that said too, right? Like, where are sex hormones synthesized and transported? Well, in body fat, in lipid, right? In fat. So there's a lot of these things that, yeah, there's differences and there's similarities, but at the end of the day, natural and enhanced bodybuilding are drastically different things, in my opinion.
I think it's been pretty exciting over the last, I don't know if it's 12 months or longer or shorter, but it seems like the media world has opened up, and pretty much everyone's admitting, except for O'Hearn. He'll be the last guy. Everyone else is admitting that they Cali Muscle has a video now where he's saying, I never said I wasn't. Yes, he did, actually. And it's nice, because I think that opens the door to a lot safer use of it.
For sure.
So, which is great. But what do you think, like, there's a huge temptation to young, and I think it's mostly young men who jump on as soon as they can get their hands on something. And then there's that feedback loop. Well, I got bigger. Everyone said, oh, you look great. Then you want more, and then you want more. Like, what's the advice to a younger athlete who's, kind of getting into it?
Well, and this is a conversation that I personally have with every athlete that I work with, if they are a young person. And I coach 18-year-olds who want to compete, and I've had people come to me at 17 years old that want to take steroids. I think unless you've really, really been perfect with things for a long period of time, you have no business even thinking about steroids, right? Like, unless you've been 100% on your meals, on your training for 2 years plus, and you've actually maximized what you can do, why do you want to touch steroids? Because they're not a cheat code. Like I said, you need to actually still put in that effort. And in fact, when I work with somebody, if you're a natural athlete and you want to go the enhanced route, that's earned. You need to prove to me that you deserve to take that, because I'm not going to put you on something if you're not somebody who can adhere to a plan. One of the things I tell everybody too, and whether they're a young individual or an older individual, and just for a caveat here, I've absolutely never put a 17-year-old or an 18-year-old on steroids, and I never would. But with that being said, whether they're younger, 18, 19, 20, whatever it is, or 45, 50, 60, it's like when somebody comes to you and wants to have the conversation about PEDs, the first thing I tell everyone is this is a lifelong decision, because there are no guarantees. You may be on replacement therapy for the rest of your life. I'm a firm believer that there's different approaches in bodybuilding, and there's the blast and cruise approach. There's the blast and come off approach. I personally am a very, very firm believer that the healthiest model in that sense is a blast and cruise approach, especially if you plan on using steroids over the long term. Because to come off completely and do it healthily, you have to stay at a very low hormonal level and slowly bring your hormones back. Well, being down here is just as unhealthy as being up here for your brain, for your heart, for everything. Whereas if you blast and cruise and you ride that midline and you mimic your natural production with cruise doses, well, you're going to stay in a lot better position. You can manage all of the health things and whatnot. Like, that's what I do. And again, that I have made the decision that I will be cruising for the rest of my life, and that's okay. It doesn't bother me from that sense, because I feel a lot better. And I had my own reasons for doing that, but it's a decision somebody makes, because when you put that needle in you for the first time, there are no guarantees that you will be able to get your hormone production back. But with the advances in the community and pharmacology and those things that we have, I mean, a lot of the times you look at all these top bodybuilders who have ran more than most of us ever will in our lives, the Flex Lewises and stuff, right, who are very, very good bodybuilders. They have kids and whatnot, right? So everyone thinks, okay, you take some steroids, you're never going to have kids. That's not the thing. But there is a chance. You can't disregard the chance that it could mess things up for sure. So that's a decision the individual has to make. I never make that decision for somebody. I give them the facts. I tell them what it is. I teach them about the drug itself, and that's on them to make that decision. If you're willing to make that decision and you come to me and say, yes, I'm ready to start, well, like I said, I have the prerequisites. Have you followed your plan diligently without screwing up week after week for 6+ months? Have you had basically unwanted cheat meals? Have you skipped training sessions? Have you skipped check-ins? There's so many things that I look for, and you better be relentless in your pursuit to improve your physique, to prove to me that you're worthy of actually using something that does bring risk upon it. Because if you're not, and you're just somebody who literally just wants to take drugs to improve your physique, well, I'm not the guy to work with you, because I want to work with people that are serious about this.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been in and out of the gym. Well, I've been in the gym since I was young, and so I can easily claim that I've been in the gym for over 40 years now. And I don't know if I've hit my genetic potential yet, but I think it's just around.
You don't look a day over 40, so
it's just around the corner. I think I got, like, the next workout. That's my genetic potential. I'm right there.
There you go.
Yeah. So you worked with. We were both at a show, and I was emceeing, and you were coaching, and you had an athlete there, Patrick Plowman. Did you have other athletes? You had Patrick Plowman there.
So I actually only had just Patrick in this show.
Just Patrick. Okay.
There was some reasons for that too, but one of our coaches on the team, he was actually prepping his first ever athletes for this show.
Oh, okay, awesome. Yeah, and Patrick did great, and
yes, he did. I was very.
And I talked to some of the judges afterwards, and who had seen him before on stage, and they said that his legs had really done something marvelous with his legs. They really came up, and that was impressive. So he finished? I was always on the side, so it was hard to see what was going on at an angle. But he did great. What were your thoughts on his performance for that show?
So to bring up Patrick's legs, we had a little bit different approach, because everybody has different body mechanics, and there's certain things you need to focus on, right? So because of that, Patrick, obviously, like I had mentioned, has some bad low back issues. So some of the things that I would normally like to use to bring up the thickness and density in the posterior chain, like RDLs or stiff leg deadlifts and heavy loading in that sense, it was just really tough for us to do. And I tried to work on them with mechanics. I review all my athletes training via video. So every check-in, my athletes are sending me videos, which I think is one of the reasons why I am able to improve athletes. Because at the end of the day, training execution is a big thing. Sending a plan is one thing, but if you don't know how an athlete is actually doing those movements, how do you know they're targeting the right muscle? Right. So we designed Patrick's split in a way, and his previous coach too had a very similar approach to volume and stuff with me, but I think there needed to just be a little bit more love and care around certain things. So we really prioritized single joint movements for his hamstrings, because we couldn't do a ton on the sense of lower back loading, right? So we were limited in that sense, but low volume, high frequency, high intensity. This guy trains hard, man. And that's what we really made sure he was doing here. And I mean, I'm talking every single set I had him in the gym doing was to failure and beyond. Wow. And not a lot of people can tap into that place, but once you get somebody to do it, that's where true physique changes happen. And going back to my own physique changes, and this is kind of where I had built this mentality behind my training and the methodologies that I use. That's what changed the most for me when I went from 230 pounds with high levels of body fat in off season to 250 pounds with a six pack still. And don't get me wrong, I was fat, I was chubby, I wasn't shredded, but I still had my abs and everything and lines in my legs. That's what changed for me, was my mentality behind training, the way I was training, the effort I was putting forth in my training. The volume came down, the intensity went up, and it just makes you realize, wow, there's something here. So then I started working on it with other people and seeing other people change. And that's realistically what we did. We maximized the efficiency of his training. I wasn't putting him into the gym to just kill him every session. I was putting him into the gym to give him recoverable volume, paying attention to what he could recover from, and maximizing the frequency, which we were hitting the hamstrings at. And at the same time, maximizing the loading and the intensity every time he stepped in the gym. We checked those boxes. And what did it result in? It resulted in drastically different side shots, because previously he had zero hamstring, and he knew it. Like it was no hamstring. And now he can sit on his hamstring, and there is a hamstring there. Is there more room to improve it? Yeah, over the long time there is. But I mean, it's one of those things, right, where people say as bodybuilders age, you can't improve their legs. Well, Patrick's over 40 years old, and we brought in hamstrings that didn't exist before. His quads still look phenomenal, right?
So here's, and leading into maybe a bit into the training concepts is, if you have an athlete, I'm just trying to think through this and I'll say it as I think through it. But so if you have an athlete and you're trying to push them, do you lean towards the failure side and pushing someone super hard, or do you lean towards shorter breaks and and I get, you know what I mean? Like, we're kind of where you're just doing lots of volume, or are you pushing really hard and heavy? I mean, it's almost like a bit of a spectrum, right?
Yeah. So I'll give you kind of insight to that here. I don't have my athletes time their rest periods really. Why? Because I want them going into every set with a gun to their head. And if they quit early, that gun goes off. So what I want you to do is I want you to rest until the point you're in a position where you can do that. And if you're still fatigued and you still have a pump, or your lactic acid is built up, or you're still breathing heavy from your previous set, you can't do that. It's going to be your cardiovascular system that's preventing you from actually taking the muscles to failure. So, I mean, there'll be rough guidelines. Like, I'll tell somebody on a heavy set of hack squats between their next set, I want you to take 3 to 5 minutes. But if that ends up being 7 minutes, I don't care. If that ends up being 2.5 minutes and you're 100% sure that you can give it everything your next set, then 2.5 minutes it is. Versus, you know what I mean? Like a single joint movement, like a bicep curl. Nobody in the world is going to need 5 minutes to recover from a single arm preacher curl, right? Like, there's no way. So it depends on that. But I will 100%, when I say intensity, I'm talking load, and I'm talking overall effort put forth to move that load. I'm not talking about high reps, low volume, or sorry, high reps, low rest, that kind of stuff. So for me, I have a thought process in the sense of, okay, well, most people go in the gym and will say they do 5 or 6 exercises and they do 3 to 4 sets. So let's kind of go in the middle. We say 5 exercises, 4 sets each. That's 20 sets in a workout. you can't train to failure for 20 sets in a workout. You actually can't. There's no way, because if you are, well, those last 10 sets are nowhere near the intensity of the first 10. Yes, you might be going to the point you can't go anymore, but if I gave you a very similar load to what you did in the first half of the workout, it would not even be close to what you're doing in the second half. So my methodology is, okay, we need to bring up your chest. Well, you were previously doing 20 half-assed sets, or maybe 20 sets where the first 10 were good and the last 10 are unrecoverable volume that are just junk volume. Well, why don't we you need to bring up your chest. Let's give you 2 chest sessions in a week. And we're going to give you 10 sets each chest session. So now those second 10 sets of chest you're doing, they're not in the same session. They're in the same week. So your volume across the week is the same, but you're getting way more out of that, because now your cup is full and you're giving everything to those 10 sets.
Right.
And you haven't pushed past that area of not being able to recover, right? Because maximum recoverable volume or minimum recoverable volume is kind of what we're shooting for. Right. Or it's maximum recoverable volume. The total volume that you can recover from to elicit a stimulus that's going to have a response where you're going to build tissue. Right. And a lot of people, in my opinion, I don't like the term overtraining. I like the term under recovering, because you get to a point in every training session where you're digging yourself into a hole. And if you can't climb out of that hole with recovery, your trends upwards in terms of your physique are not going to go this way. They're going to stay like this. And for some people, they even go like this, right? And that's kind of where I'm at. So most of my athletes, their training sessions are 8 to 12 sets in a single session. And people are like, what? Well, that's what it takes. You know what I mean? Like for myself, I have dominant legs, and not right now, but previously I was training quads once every 16 days for 8 sets. Yeah. My quads didn't go anywhere. I still have the quads I had before doing that. It was
I think, who is it? Who's the guy with the massive legs from the 80s?
Tom Platz.
Tom Platz. He used to train twice a month.
Yeah, exactly.
He did quads twice a month.
Well, that's exactly it, right?
But and part of it is to blow them up. Yeah, he would blow up his quads when he trained.
Yeah. Right. So, and that's just it. I mean, there's more than one way to skin a cat. I'm never going to be the guy that sit here and says everything's black and white and you need to train 8 to 12 sets. But I am a very, very firm believer, and I will fight this till the day that I die, and I'll stand on the hill with this flag, that a lot of people need to train harder and do less. Less is more when it comes to bodybuilding, as long as the effort is there. And sure, there are people that can grow, and a lot of these top bodybuilders in the world do train very high volume. And it's like, well, how did they get there? Well, you need to realize they are the genetically elite, and they could do anything and build the physique that they have. Now you add in, some of them take astronomical amounts of drugs to be able to recover from that. And that's where they are, right? But there is a trend. You look at some of the best bodybuilders currently, most of them train in a lower volume fashion. You look at James Hollingshead, Nick Walker, Brett Wilkin. You know what? All these young guys coming up, they're Ian Valier, right? They have lower volume approaches to training because they can connect well with tissues. There's a lot of damage being done with every single contraction that they do, and they're trying to recover the best way possible. Yeah, I like that. I think that's, it's maybe a topic that's been on my mind a lot in the last while, is when I watch people work out, and maybe it's being caused by this proliferation of online coaching, where just everybody's a coach, and like anybody can send anybody a routine that says bench press 3 sets, flies 3 sets, and then, but there's no intensity attached to it. And, it's just, you're just going through the motions. Like you said, you're just putting in junk volume. 100%. Yeah. And we won't get into that topic about everybody being a coach. I could talk for days, but my point on that is, just because you're a good athlete or a successful athlete does not mean you can coach people. Because you can follow a diet does not mean you can write one. Because you can take a drug does not mean you understand a drug, right? And that's where, for me, it sucks, because I end up being the guy that has to fix a lot of people's problems that come from coaches that had absolutely no idea what they were doing. And trust me, it's every other week. I've had people, and actually this year I had it, and it's almost a slap in the face, but at the same time, it just brings a realization about. So very recently, I had somebody reach out to me, and they had applied with me last summer, and they wanted me to prep them. They wanted me to do an off season with them and prep them this year. And then they ended up basically, we're like, yeah, let's get started. Never heard back from them, ghosted me, is what it is, not worried about it. Then they get back to me just recently. They were 6 weeks out of it would have been, Alberta Open. And they had to remove themselves from a show. Their coach did some very astronomical shit with them. Their health was completely skewed. And now they come to me to fix it. And I'm like, listen, man, what do you want me to do? You can't do this show. You're completely screwed up. And you decided to make the decision to go with somebody that had absolutely no clue what they were doing. And yeah, it might have saved you a couple of dollars, but you also may be done bodybuilding for the rest of your life now. And that's the reality of this situation, right? And I'm not saying that people need to just hire me. There are a lot of good coaches out there, but there's a lot of horrible coaches out there. And it really drives me nuts. I had a really good conversation recently with Jenna from Bombshell, talking about this type of thing. And I'm somebody who wants to grow the sport. I want to see the sport be mainstream and well known. And when this stuff happens, especially for athletes early in their bodybuilding career, it turns them away from the sport and makes the sport look bad, right? So I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, I do think eventually these coaches will be weeded out, but I think it's also on the athlete to make sure they're doing their homework, asking the questions. And for coaches, like if you're somebody who is doing that, just take a look at yourself in the mirror and ask if you really have what it takes to care about people, because this is people's health you're playing with at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think, I guess the other interesting part of it is that, most of these people that are going out and getting coaches, they're not headed to the Olympia. They're going to go on stage for a regional show. They're going to get up there. They probably, unless there's 3 people, they're not going to be third. They're going to be somewhere in the mix. And, so yeah, I guess it's unfortunate that these coaches exist, but maybe they're just buddies. And maybe that's all that they can really register themselves as, is their workout buddy online.
At the end of the day, people need to look after themselves. You are your own maker and you need to care about yourself, right? Like there's a situation that I won't dive into here, but it happened to a friend of mine who's a very good coach, and kind of almost mentor him a little bit and go over some things with him here and there. And he had an athlete leave him. And it's simply the reason the athlete left was because he wanted more drugs, it sounded like. And my friend had him on a it was his first exposure, the first time this kid has ever taken any PEDs. And it was a very smart laid out plan, very low dosage. He was getting a ton of results. He looked incredible. This guy switches coaches, goes and works with somebody. It's his first time doing PEDs, keep in mind. And he's a couple weeks out of his first show now. And he's on like 1.4 grams of gear. And it's like, what? Like you're 22 years old and you've never taken this before. And you're using more than people who have been doing this for 5-6 years are using in your first time. Wow. Now, where do you go? Right. And people wonder why people get hurt, right? That's the stuff that, like, sorry, I sound like I'm getting fired up probably because I am a little bit, but like that really drives me nuts, because you give our sport a bad name, you hurt people. That's not okay.
Yeah. It was interesting. I had an experience where I was kind of looking around for a coach, and I'd seen some good stuff out of this one guy, and I won't name him, but people will probably get it. But I sent him a message, and then I got text messages back, and I saved the text. They're terrible. And it was like, hey, I'm going to this natural show. I want to do well. I want to win. And then the first question out of this guy is, what PEDs are you on? And I'm like, I'm not. This is a natural show. And I'm like, and then the next message was, you need to be on PEDs. You're going to do really good. And I said, well, it's a natural show and I need to be natural in order to compete in it. Yeah, but if you did have PEDs, you'd probably go pro. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. But I'm staying in the natural. It was like, dude, give up. I'm going to be natural for this show. I'm going to be natural for the next show. Yeah. You got to let me do that. And he just would not stop. I just dumped him like in a heartbeat. I
have again, a unique mindset on that. But the fact of the matter is, and I was at nationals last year, natural nationals, I had 2 athletes doing it. Both placed phenomenally well. Both got second place in their respective classes. And I'm 100% sure. Well, one of them I know for sure. The people that beat them were on PEDs.
Yeah.
Right. And like I myself am somebody who prides myself on that. I will never put somebody in a natural tested show having taken a natural performance enhancing drug.
Did I see you at that show? I was at that show. Did I see you?
I didn't see you there, but I had seen you at the previous qualifying show, but I was there. Yeah, I was there last year.
That was at Toronto, November 27th.
I had Samantha Nicholson and Bryce Cardinal in that show.
Oh, okay. Well, there is definitely guys on steroids at that show.
There is at every natural show, and it makes me sick. partially because what are you doing? You know what I mean? Like you're literally showing up at a natural show with people who actually are natural.
Yeah.
How do you sleep at night? Like, congratulations. You took a performance enhancing and drug, which literally will improve your performance and your physique. Yeah. And great. You won the medal around your neck. Congratulations. Yeah. You beat a bunch of guys who aren't enhanced. Well, the fact of the matter is the reason you're doing this is because you can't hang with the big dogs that are actually taking PEDs, and you would get just mopped with them. Right. Yeah. So it's a small complex that people have, and it's pretty bad if you ask me. And I have athletes who have came to me from working with other coaches that told me they were natural athletes, but then I find out they weren't actually natural athletes. They competed in natural shows and they had taken PEDs under these other coaches because these coaches pushed it on them. And some of these athletes don't know better. Right. So that, again, that's a whole nother can of worms that we won't get into, but you're yourself. You are a lifetime natural athlete, and that's something to be proud of for sure. If that's a decision you've made. And
I, you know, realistic, I know I can't compete with the guys in the open. Like I just can't. Like they're bigger than me. They're more cut than me. I just like I can do what I can do.
Actually, so last year at the Alberta Open, I had a classic physique guy who in the natural show who was 100% natural. Great physique. Some small things I knew may hold him back. His lats weren't as big and wide, but phenomenal legs. Conditioning was insane. And we ended up not winning our class at the natural show. And he said to me, what's your thoughts on me registering for the open show tomorrow? I was like, let's do it, man. Let's see where we stack up. And I had another athlete. I had another athlete in his class. Yeah. Sorry, I had two. So I had three guys in one class. Yeah. And, or I guess they were in the overall together. So two guys in one class. And Bryce actually ended up going to the open show and winning the open show. He didn't win the natural show, but he went into the open show and won the natural show. And it was wild. And I actually just started working with Taylor, who won the overall there. So in the overall, there was 4 athletes, and I'm now coaching 3 of them.
Yeah, that just goes like, it's just so much ego driven, some of that, you know, where you just you don't need to just compete where you should be. And well, and it even goes up to the highest level, right? Like I know there are some Ben Weider pro athletes who like won the Ben Weider pro in some divisions that were enhanced and are now going to the Olympia as a natural athlete, but they were an enhanced athlete. And like, I know people who literally like were in relationships with these people and they were taking things while they were in relationships. And it's like, what are you doing? Right. I mean, we won't get into that, but anyways, it's just, it's tough. About a little, it says a lot about people's character, right? And I mean that's everything. So what's the funniest thing that's ever happened at a show? I'm curious. You've been to a lot of shows. What's the crazy stuff?
So I'm trying to think here. This is the tough one. I would say probably last year, and this wasn't my athlete or anything like that. But last year there was somebody who came backstage into the tanning tents at the Alberta Open and crawled up into like a ball on the floor and was like having a nap. And there's other people who could tell you a little bit more, but it was just it was wild. I'm trying to think of some things here that would just be hilarious. For me, nothing's really funny on show weekends. It's all business for me. So I trying to think. I don't got any. Maybe I'll come back to it if I think of something funny. But I don't know if it's funny or if it's just. So I can tell you something about actually Patrick Plowman's prep. Yeah. 11 days out. We're 11 days out, and he's suffering pretty good. But like again, suffering is a relative term. Some people are on 0 carbs. Patrick was not on 0 carbs. Yeah. But he's dieted down and he's tired. And I get a message from him that he's quitting. He's quitting bodybuilding. He's done with the show. I'm like, what's going on here? And so good. I get a message from his wife because me and Sarah chat all the time because she helps him with meal prep and stuff like that. She's kind of warning me that Patrick's going to be texting me, and she's sending me the screenshots of what he's saying to her. And we're like, okay, we got to rope this in. What the hell is going on here? Yeah. And so I'm messaging Patrick, and long story short, he blew his back out at 11 days out, and he does have a bad back, like we talked about, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm like, listen, man, like, don't do anything right now. Do not make any rash decisions right now. And he was on his way. I guess he had texted Sarah and he was on his way to get some food and stuff. And we were just like talking him down from this so bad. But long story short, he didn't end up doing it. And he's like, what do I do? And I was like, you're going to rest. And he's like, I'm 11 days out. I can't just take a bunch of days off. I'm like, yes, you can.
Yeah.
Yes, you can. And then sure enough, the next morning he wakes up and he's like, coach, I got to go do cardio. And I was like, you're not going to do anything. You're resting.
Yeah.
He's like, okay, fine. I'll listen to you and blah, 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 blah. Next day comes around. Coach, I have to go train. I have to do cardio. How's the back? It's a little bit better, but it's still pretty messed up. Pat, you're not doing a damn thing. And then we kind of got into it a little bit. And I said to him, like, listen, I want you to win. You need to understand, like, I also want to see you win. If you think I want to see you lose, that ain't the truth. You know that I want to see you win. But he's just, again, he's such a killer mentality, right? He just wants to go, wants to win so bad. He'll train through whatever pain. And that's where I know there's issues, because if you are just training through that pain, it's going to cause inflammation and water retention and stuff. So it's like, let's go back. So I had that conversation with him, and he finally ends up saying, okay, fine, I'll rest one more day. I get a voice note from him the next morning, and he literally said word for word, I hate to fucking say this to you. I hate it. It kills me to say this to you. But once again, you were right, coach. And I just burst out laughing. And he was like, I feel so good this morning. And I got him to send me poses to make sure he could hit his poses.
Oh, that's cool.
He wasn't just saying, oh yeah, I'm not in pain anymore, but he legitimately had felt better, and we roped him in again, and he didn't. But that's just one of the things. And I've dealt with that before, right? Like I had an athlete get an infection from an injection on peak week. And it's like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do here?
Yeah.
Luckily for that one, I had never navigated that before, but I do have some friends, like I talk with Matt Jensen here and there, and I know he's somebody that I can always bounce things off of. So I messaged Matt and I was like, hey man, what's your approach here? Here's what I'm thinking of doing. And I just want to hear what you would do. And he sends me a picture back of his athlete stepping on stage the same day as mine with a massive infection from a shot in his arm. He's like, I'm dealing with the same thing, man.
Wow.
And he's like, here's what I'm going to do. And I was like, okay, I'm doing the exact same thing. So we're on track and see how it goes. Matt's guy, he ended up having to pull out of the show and put into a different show just because it had gotten so bad. And that's a risk, right? That's no risk.
For sure.
Mine, we actually, it did recover well enough that we were able to step on stage, and he ended up winning, and he did very well. But
that's awesome.
Again, just, I guess they're not funny stories, but they're things that
I thought it was pretty funny when Patrick won, and then Sarah was presenting prizes, and then she comes up and then we have a presenter kissing an athlete, and it's like, what? Nobody knows in the audience that this is okay.
kids run up on stage. That was a cool moment though. You know what I mean? Like, sure. I know Pat very well now, and I know he's worked for that for a long time, right?
Yeah.
And he's just never gotten it. So for that to happen in his hometown in front of his family, like the last show he did was here in Edmonton.
Okay.
The things didn't go the way they wanted. And he worked for a good amount of time to make that happen again. And there we are. Yeah,
that's pretty awesome. When's the next show that you have people at?
Toronto, actually. So I leave Thursday morning. I'll be in Toronto.
That's what show is that? That's
Toronto Pro Super Show.
Pro Super Show. Okay.
So that's cool. The amateur and the pro show. I only have Patrick doing that show, and then I have a handful here in TNT, and then we'll be going with that crew over to Van Pro, where I'm going to be doing 2 pro debuts with 2 of my pro athletes.
Wow. Is Patrick in that one?
So Patrick's just doing Toronto right now.
Toronto, okay.
We'll see. I mean, there is no Masters Pro card in Vancouver.
Right.
So only in Toronto there is. So we're stopping there first, and we'll talk if we need to do another show. We might go back for shows in October, but we'll see where things are at.
That's cool. That's exciting.
Yeah. It's I'm excited for it all. So it's a busy couple of months here coming up. It'll be nice. At the tail end of it, I have my 2-month honeymoon, or 2-week honeymoon. So
really?
Yeah, wow. I'm going away for my honeymoon in September. So that'll be. I'm not a guy that usually takes vacations or time away from work.
Yeah.
So, and my wife deserves a little bit of time, so
nice.
we'll be going away and having a little bit of relaxed time. I mean, I will still have some athletes on prep, so I'll do check-ins and stuff with those athletes. But for the rest of my athletes, I'm basically just going to push their payment 2 weeks so that they haven't paid for 2 weeks. They weren't coached.
Sure. Yeah.
I know everybody's supportive of that stuff, and I need a break too here and there,
Yeah.
right? To reset, come back full batteries. So I'm excited for that for sure. But I just want to have a winning season first, man. I got big goals for this season with the team, and I'm excited for it.
I think it's interesting. And I'm not a coach, but I have a certification to coach. And, you know, I get a lot of people and they're amateur. They're just starting out. They're, you know, at some point they should get a real coach, but they come to me and they ask me questions. And it's like, yeah, I don't know how you deal with even two people, like, never mind, like, however many you deal with is shocking. Like, I'll have people say, okay, here's what do you think of this? And then I got to think about it. And then someone else will ask a question. And it's like, I don't know how you keep track of all of them. It's shocking, actually.
I'm a data nerd, so I have spreadsheets with everything. Now, I'm not going to lie and sit here, like, there are times it can get mentally exhausting because you do work with, sometimes people are very neurotic, right? And that's not their own doing, and then it's not their own fault, but people are just individually different from each other. And some people are very neurotic in the sense that, like, they're asking a question about every single thing every minute of the day. And I have a really good system that I put in place with my athletes, and I have a very detailed questionnaire. So, like, on your check-in day once a week, you can tell me about almost everything that I need to know. You're sending me 7 days worth of weights. You're sending me blood glucose. You're sending me issues on digestion. You name it. It's taking sheet. And the reason I do that is to kind of make things standardized in the sense that I get all the information I need on a weekly basis in your check-in. Now, of course, if there's an emergency, and I become friends with all of my athletes as well. And all of my work is done through WhatsApp with them. So I have my WhatsApp on my computer all day, and I have their Excel spreadsheets and stuff. And everything's data to me, right? But it also is, and this is an area that I've really had to work on further. As somebody who does become very close with their athletes and develops close relationships, you have to keep a firm line between friend and coach, because when that line gets blurred, now decision-making gets blurred on the athlete's part and the coach's part. And if my decision-making is blurred because I care about you more as a friend than I care about your results, well, I'm not going to push you as hard as I need to. And that's going to make your product suffer. And then at the end of the day, that's probably going to hurt our friendship anyways. So for me, I wear the hat of friend, but I also wear the hat as coach. Everybody on this team is my family, from my coaches to my athletes, and I will always take care of them, but I'm going to push them. Right. And being able to wear the hat of coach is a really, really important thing. And I think that's where some people mess up. They blur those lines. I've surely done it in the past. And that was a learning curve for me, making sure that I set those boundaries. And I set boundaries with my athletes too. Like, listen, you don't have to message me every single day, 12 times a day about this and that. You know what I mean? And it's and some people do, and it's okay. But it's like, if you're sending me your training videos every single day, and then you're sending me more training videos on check-in, well, that's not fair to your 20 teammates who are checking in every other day, because I have to watch their training videos. And we have these conversations, and it's just a respect thing. And it goes back to, I am stern in some things. My athletes have to check in before a certain time, because if that time isn't met, and all of a sudden check-ins are coming in at 4 or 5 p.m., well, I've been working on check-in since 5:30 this morning. And I do have a life. I need to train. I have a wife I need to see. And normally I'm on my computer for 12 plus hours. And if your check-in comes in at the end of that or after that, it's just disrespectful for you to expect me to have to sit in my computer for 14, 16 hours a day. Right. So I put out these guidelines with my athletes, and everybody follows it. And if you don't follow it, like, and people know, and it is a standard that I've had to set, and it was really hard for me to do. When I have an athlete's check-in come in at 4 p.m. and I still have 6 check-ins to do, and I'm doing this at 7 p.m. so I have to be done. Well, I had to force myself to not do those check-ins. And I told my athletes, you will always get a same-day response. Every athlete will, unless I reach out to you and tell you there's a reason why you aren't. But if your check-in's coming in late, I can't promise you get a same-day response, and I can't promise you even get a response, because you're not respecting your teammates or my time. And that's where, again, it's communication and trust. So I'm very big on communication. I communicate all my expectations for my athletes, and I expect them to do the same with me. And if those expectations are astronomical on day one, I'm going to tell them, hey, these are not going to be met, because I'm not here to be your hand holder. You cannot text me 50 times a day, every day, with this. Hey, coach, can I put an extra 1 gram of salt on this meal? Can I do this? You know what I mean? Like, small things like that just really don't matter at certain points. like, wait till your check-in, compile a list of 20 questions for me if you want. I'll make sure I answer those questions when I respond with a video or a voice note to your check-in.
Yeah, it was funny. There's this one guy, like, I guess I'm not his coach, just fair disclaimer, but I'm kind of helping him with his diet planning. And he sent me a text message one time and he goes, "Is it okay if I eat peanut butter?"
Yeah.
So what do you think? Seriously, why are you asking me these questions?
Yeah.
No, you never get to eat peanut butter. What do you have people on to tracking programs for their?
No, so I do everything. I'm not a fan of those apps and stuff like that. Everything for me is, like I said, I have a very in-depth spreadsheet that I've created that has all my athletes' diet. I send them a PDF of it on kind of day one. And same with their training program is on a spreadsheet here now. And basically when they get that, I make a like a Word document version with everything written out in terms of like, okay, here's your supplements, this one with this meal, this one with this meal, here's your cardio, here's your meal one, X food, X amount of food, Y amount of food, etc., all the way through all their meals. And then basically I just take that Word document and that's copy and pasted into WhatsApp. So every time I make diet changes, I change it on their Excel spreadsheet that has all the macronutrients, the sodium, potassium, everything under the sun on there. And then I just adjust it in the WhatsApp, send it back to them. So the first one, they get kind of the PDF. That's a nice fancy thing. The reason I had to get away from sending the PDFs every time was, well, I have a lot of athletes, and when you're updating diets every week or every other week, I ended up burning through 3 hard drives on my laptop. And
that's crazy.
Finally, I was like, I got to figure some out here. I just couldn't figure it out when my laptop kept freezing and dying. I'm like, okay, there's got to be another way to do this. And actually, I did kind of like a pilot study with some of my athletes, a handful of them, and I tried it first, and they were all like, this is way better. It's way easier. It's in one spot. You're just telling me what to eat. I don't need to look at macronutrients. It's literally just eat this, this, this.
Oh, okay.
And I do have some athletes that I do macros with too. Yeah. But I'm a firm believer that if you want to do macros, that needs to be earned. You need to tell me you can follow a structured diet first, because if it fits your macros, and flexible dieting as well as like an actual macro diet are not the same thing. Saving all your calories for a donut at the end of the day is not going to benefit your physique at all.
Yeah. So you're dictating. That sounds heavy, but you're dictating the actual food they're eating and the weight of that food.
Yes, and total calories, total sodium intake in a day, total water intake, you name it. Now, like I said, there are athletes that I work with that prefer macronutrients, and as long as I can get them to a place where we get them into a spot that I fully trust that they are adhering to the macronutrients. And then when I do macros, I don't lay out, here's the amount of the totals you're having for a day. I personally think that's pretty lazy coaching. I go meal by meal. So if I want you to have 250 grams of protein and you're having 5 meals, well, I'm going to have 50 grams of protein in each meal. And then I'm going to time your carbs where I want your carbs. I'm going to time your fats where I want your fats. So you'll have 5 different meals of macros. And then time to time, I will be checking in to make sure, okay, here's your, and the reason that I give people macros is not so they can just eat all the foods they love. It's more so, okay, so one day you want ground turkey, or 1 week you want ground turkey instead of ground beef in your meals. Well, perfect. You got to alter a couple things in your macros and you can make that happen. But you still should be eating whole foods and not processed garbage and making smart decisions. And that's where I get people to first if they want to do a macro diet. But I will say, 10 out of 10 times, no matter what, I have seen a lot better progress with people following a meal plan than I have people following macros. Because again, you take the thinking out of it for somebody, they just have to execute, things are laughing.
I think the problem with the macro diet is that it kind of opens the door for, if my carbs are off by 50 grams, well, then I can just eat jelly beans.
Yeah,
you know, exactly. Like and it's not, that's probably not the right way to do it.
No, not at all. And like, sure, there is a time and a place to have some insulin spiking foods and stuff, but when I do a meal plan, I put those in there anyways. I'm going to jam honey and I'm going to jam Rice Krispie squares or whatever, where I want to jam them, that they're actually going to benefit your physique. For you to wake up in the morning and feel like, oh, you know what, I need a couple Rice Krispie squares. Yeah. That ain't going to benefit you.
No, that's right. Yeah. So you put food in before workouts. Is that what you do? You do?
Yeah, I'm very big around peri-workout nutrition. So I like to time a large hefty amount of my athletes' carbs, which are utilized for training, obviously. through glycogen and stuff around training for sure.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times my athletes will have like over 55, more like 60%. Sometimes even higher, depending on the athlete and where their blood glucose sits and how their body handles carbs around the training window. So like pre-workout, intra-workout, and post-workout for sure.
Right. What happens? Like I train first thing in the morning. How do you, I can't get up early enough to eat enough. You know what I mean?
Liquids, man. So I have athletes that do that too. I have bodybuilders that wake up first thing and train first thing in the morning. Like actually I coach most of the athletes that are coaches on our team. I coach as well. But for instance, Dylan, he's that way. He trains first thing in the morning. So he wakes up in the morning and well, he actually does a little bit of a macro style diet. So he's not a good example, but for what I do anyways, I'll usually use a fruit because fructose is going to drive itself into and refill liver glycogen very quick. Yeah. Usually I like to go with something like a banana because there's a lot more fructose and sugars than there is fibers versus something like berries. Mm-hmm. So I'll drive that in, fruit juice, orange juice, honey, protein, whey isolate, or a hydrolyzed isolate, right? So you eat that, you're digested in 45 minutes, ready to rock.
Sure. Yeah.
Versus you have like cream of rice or
right.
a bagel or something or whatever, right? It's going to take an hour, hour and a half. Normally I say about 90 to 120 minutes pre-workout for pre-training meal. So yeah, I mean, it depends on the person, but if you have an hour and a half, from the time you wake up, if you have an hour and a half to the time you get in the gym, that's enough food for me to make decisions with foods like cream of rice, etc., to get it in you, be digested and ready to rock. I have some of my athletes, one of my men's physique athletes, Ali, he trains first thing in the morning when he's on day shifts because he's just so busy, or sorry, night shifts because he's just so busy. So when that happens, he has gummy bears that day with fruit juice and whey isolate, right? Because it's literally quick digesting, and that's all I need. Drive those nutrients into him. He's got a lot of carbs, and I will use clustered dextrins as well. So I might do a blend of like a highly branched cyclic dextrin with orange juice for your carbs pre-workout with some whey isolate. And then while you're training, you're sipping on more highly branched cyclic dextrin with EAAs, which is basically a meal replacement while you're training. And then post-workout, we'll bring in whole foods.
Right. Sounds pretty great.
Everything for me comes around digestion in that sense too, right? What can you optimally digest to perform your highest? Because if you're in the gym and you're bloated and you feel like shit, well, chances are you're just not going to perform. And some people even need some like MCT oils and stuff first thing in the morning with that high bolus of carbs to prevent digestive issues. Some people get digestive issues if you just drive in a large amount of carbs and sugars first thing in the morning. So putting in like coconut oils that are going to be absorbed pretty quick and MCT oils that are going to be used for energy will help that too.
Do you, we haven't said the word creatine this whole time.
Huge fan.
Awesome. Does everyone use creatine?
I don't have an athlete that doesn't.
Yeah, of course.
The only time I would have somebody who doesn't is if they had kidney problems. And I have had it in the past where I had an athlete not taking it because they did have kidney problems. They were more a lifestyle athlete anyways. So, I mean, at the end of the day, not a huge concern there, but I have almost every one of my athletes will take it. I'm a huge believer in it. It's one of the most researched supplements ever made. It was one of the first supplements ever made. It's phenomenal. And people have this predisposition to believe that it's going to make them hold a bunch of water. It's like, well, it doesn't hold water between the skin and the muscle. It holds water within the muscle, which is going to make you perform better and make you actually look fuller and tighter if you're using it.
Yeah, that's right. Do you, like when I did a podcast on creatine a little while ago, but do you, leading up to a show, do you pull people off creatine and put them back on? Do you have them like at the show? Are they on it or where?
I've done both. I think I don't think at that level, especially if you're talking performance enhanced individuals, like individuals that are enhanced, pulling 5 or 10 grams of creatine isn't going to drastically change the look that much. Normally I make so many micro changes. Like I pull sweeteners, I pull any supplement that has sweetener in it, EAAs, all that kind of stuff in the final weeks. And normally I'll just pull creatine in that sense too. And like, they're just sipping water and salt when they train type thing. But it depends person to person, to be completely honest. If somebody is dry and hard and full, well, why am I going to change that? Why am I going to pull it for the sake of it? If somebody does have some water to pull out and I just figure, you know what, it's a safe bet if we just try to pull this, then I'll pull it for sure. Do I think it makes a drastic difference? I don't. So it's not something I think you have to pull at all. But I've done both. So again, every decision that I make is based on the individual in front of me at a given time. And I find it wild too. And just going back to our contest prep stuff, when coaches will send out a peak week diet for the week, it's like, here's your diet for the week. It's like, pardon my French, what the fuck? You know what I mean?
It doesn't
like,
work.
How
doesn't make sense.
The physique, what if you spill on day 3?
Yeah.
Well, here's your day 4 and 5, and all of a sudden you're just eating more and more. And it's like, for me, I literally make decisions during peak week on that day. My athletes are sending me check-ins 3 times a day, more actually. Normally I have my athletes send me pictures 2 hours after every meal, and I will tell them what to do. And like Alberta Open was an interesting one for me because like I said, I'm a data guy and I have my spreadsheets and I have everything, and like I'm a nerd for that stuff. But I actually had forgotten my laptop at home when I was on my way to Calgary, and I realized it.
Man.
And I was a little bit worried, but I'm like, you know what? I trust myself enough that I'm going to go with my eye.
Yeah.
And I talked to my other coaches about this. We did an Instagram live the other day, and they were just saying how cool it was, because for me, I looked at Patrick and I was just like, okay, well, I know in my head what you've been eating up to this point. I don't know exact numbers, but I have everything in WhatsApp. But regardless, I'm able to look at you and look like, okay, you're a little bit flat. Well, I know that 90 grams of cream of rice is about 72 grams of carbs. So I'm going to drive in X amount of cream of rice, X amount of honey. I want you to have X amount of chicken. And I did everything that entire peak from Thursday when I was in Calgary till Sunday without a spreadsheet, without anything. And that was the first time I've done that. I've always had my computer and input things, or I'll pre-plan things and then make last minute decisions. But this was just firing from the hip.
Yeah.
And it may have been one of the best peaks I've had. So it was
wow.
Just it was a cool thing for me to just remind myself to trust my eye. And it does. Sometimes the spreadsheets don't matter. They do. And data is very important. But a lot of the times as a coach, you just have to trust your eye and what's in front of you.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that makes total sense. Like total sense.
Yeah.
And I guess it would be super hard if you were an online coach that you didn't see your athletes enough to really be able to tell that's flat. You know, like it would be hard to say that's flat, that's spilt. And if you don't see them all the time.
For sure. Well, and like that goes even further. And I've seen this, and this is like dangerous into the drugs and pre-planning drugs, right? So like I've seen coaches write out 16-week cycles for their athletes from the get-go. And like, it's like, dude, how do you know how they're responding to any of these drugs?
Yeah.
You're just going to tell them to spend all these. And like, I do give people a rough outline on what they need to get on hand. So there's not a lot of stress and stuff like that. But I put things in based on the physique I see in front of me. I'm not going to tell you that at 8 weeks out exactly, you are starting Winstrol or you are starting this drug or whatever. It's like, no, I'm going to put that drug in when the body tells me it's time to put it in, because this is the response we need. Every decision has a response. Every drug has a response. Everything has a purpose that you need to put it in for. So when I have that purpose and I need that purpose, I will use that tool to elicit that response.
Yeah. That makes sense. What other supplements, other than the obvious, like whey protein and creatine, like what other supplements, you know, the Popeyes supplement store supplements, like what other supplements do you recommend that athletes are on?
So I have my baseline. I'm a firm believer that like everybody should be hammering vitamin D in way higher amounts than they believe. So like I'm talking 10,000 IUs a day. 5 to 10,000 I use a day, sometimes 20 for people. There's some cool studies on that stuff with deficiencies and whatnot. EAAs for sure. BCA, EAA, BCA is garbage. If somebody listening to this is using BCAs, throw them in the garbage. Stop now. Start using EAAs. They're going to have the 3 branched chain amino acids, leucine, isoleucine, and valine. They're all going to be in your EAA as well, but you're also going to have another 6 essential amino acids. And they're called an essential amino acid because literally to turn on the muscle building process, you need all 9 essential amino acids. So if you're only, yes, leucine is the most important one, absolutely. Yeah. But if you're only using 3 of 9, you're missing a lot there. And in my opinion, it's just garbage. So EAAs is a primary focus. Like you said, whey protein, creatine. I'm not, there's not a crazy amount of stuff. Now, like I said, I have a lot on the health side, the health supplements that I will push in people, and that's a whole nother thing. I do think most people need omega support. So I really like krill oils or cod liver oil. Krill oil, I really like it because of the effects it has on like HDL and LDL and stuff like that. And it's not really able to oxidize the same way like a regular fish oil was. Most fish oils people buy on shelves are just garbage because they oxidize and they're not doing much for you. especially if they're in like a clear bottle and just sitting on a shelf. Well,
Right.
I would be willing to guarantee a very large percent of them are oxidized. Same even with actually olive oils. Like olive oils are a huge one. So buying quality stuff is important, and that's why I really like krill oil over anything else.
Yeah. Do your athletes use a pre-workout at all? What are your
so I control my athletes' stimulant intake. So I believe caffeine has a very, very good performance boosting effect, but at the same time, anytime you ingest caffeine, you take yourself from a parasympathetic state to a sympathetic state, right? And to maximize recovery, you have to be in a parasympathetic state. So, and when I say like parasympathetic or sympathetic, we're talking fight or flight, or rest and digest, right? And like fight or flight is your sympathetic state, which we get in that state when we train. But as soon as we're done training, we want to get out of that as fast as we can and get to your rest and digest, so that we're actually recovering, utilizing the nutrients properly, letting the body recover. So anytime there's stress, a lot of stress, you come into a sympathetic state. Well, stimulants, caffeine, etc., are stressors. And that takes you, it increases your heart rate, does all this stuff that takes you out of a parasympathetic state. So for me, I basically control all my athletes' caffeine intake. I like to see people have 150 milligrams roughly a day total, 150 to 200 max. And usually I'll tell them like, hey, you can space this accordingly, but if you're having 2 cups of coffee in the morning, you're not taking a 250 milligram pre-workout pre-training, or vice versa. Like the best place I see things being used is no caffeine all day and a little bit of caffeine pre-training. But again, if somebody trains late in the day and it's their last thing they do, stay away from that. I program stim-free pre-workouts for my athletes because I'm a firm believer in what citrulline does. I'm a firm believer in what glycerol does, or nitric oxide benefiting supplements, right? So those things for me offer a lot more than anything else.
You know what's, I'll give you, you probably know this, but the one supplement, and it's, if when you take a lot of these training programs for personal trainers, it's in every book, and it's well studied, is sodium bicarbonates, which is baking soda, which sounds so silly, really. But then when you realize that it's a buffering agent that reduces that burn, so your free hydrogen in the bloodstream, like it makes it so that you can do a couple more reps when you start to burn. It's a funny one because it's hard to find any pre-workout that has baking soda essentially in it. Well, it's kind of a funny one.
Like you said, I mean, there's a million ways to skin a cat, and there's a million different things that do a million different things. Like people think, even creatine, people think it's just like, oh, it's just for muscle building. Well, no, it actually has very, very good cognitive benefits and brain benefits as well. And like there's studies with like to depressions and stuff like that, right? There's a lot of different things that it benefits overall, but a lot of these small things can have, like, people always ask me, what is the #1 supplement you would add to your intra workout or pre-workout for a pump? You know what I tell them?
Water. Salt, yeah, of course.
Salt.
You need water too.
Oh, yeah.
That's not a supplement, but
100%. Like you're not getting a pump, and that's why like this whole dry scooping craze that people do. It's like half those nutrients that you're putting in your mouth with a dry scoop need to be well absorbed in water and actually transported via water to be utilized. And if you're like in a lot of these people too, they're working full days, right? They're not getting that much water in. Straight to the gym, bang a pre-workout scoop, take a sip of water. It's like one sip of water over the past 8 hours ain't enough to get a pump.
No, that's just silly.
But I mean, there's tons. I could, for me, I think that the most important stuff from a supplement basis that I focus on, outside of those kind of basic ones, because at the end of the day, food is going to cover a lot of your bases, right? If you design a proper meal plan, outside of, like you said, stim-based pre-workouts, I do really like. I have some of my favorite ones that are just dosed incredibly well. With the glycerol, citrulline, like those are 2 things that citrulline for sure. If somebody isn't taking any sort of pre-workout, I absolutely will have them dosing citrulline, intra-workout or pre-workout with the EAA and stuff like that. So outside of those supplements, I just mostly really am big on health support supplements, and that goes even further when we're talking PED enhancements. Like I used to actually make my athletes, and this sounds really odd and it sounds like I'm a control freak, but this is how as far as I was going at a point to make sure my athletes were healthy. I would not write somebody a steroid cycle unless they sent me a receipt of the health supplements that I wanted them to get.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's good.
I moved away from it because, again, it's very micromanagey, and at some point you just have to trust your people. And at the end of the day, I analyze blood work multiple times a year for every one of my athletes. And if you're not doing what I want you to with health supplements, I'm going to see it on your blood work. And well, sorry, you can't go on cycle until this is fixed and maintained for a long period of time. So if you're not doing what I ask you to do, and you're not taking care of your health, well, I'm going to find out, and that's going to prevent you from continuing to do this, because I'm not going to write you another cycle.
Yeah. I mean, there's a funny story I have having to do with supplements is, there was one prep that I was in, and I just was, I was dying from hunger, and I just was really suffering. And so I was with my daughter, and I said, I need to get something. I just need something in my mouth. And so we went to Walmart, and we bought one of those big bottles of vitamin C chewables.
Yeah.
And I just started fisting them. And I think I ate over 100 in like the drive home. And like I did the math later, and it was something like, I forget what the amount was, but it was like this ridiculous amount. And it just, I can tell you now what overdosing vitamin C does, but it caused the most ridiculous cramping, stomach cramping I've ever had ever. I thought I was going to die. And then it went straight.
Probably got the runs too.
And then it wasn't just the runs. That's an understatement of what happened next. Well, it was really bad.
Vitamin C is actually something you can use in high doses for people that are having constipation issues, and like combination with magnesium and stuff like that. It
was nasty.
That I lean on. But fun fact, actually, vitamin C is also a very, very good in high dose natural diuretic to use for natural bodybuilders. So that's actually something I will do with my natural bodybuilders to flush some water out when I'm trying to dry them out a little bit.
Yeah, not 100 tablets.
And definitely not a chewable if you think about all the gelatin that's in there.
It wasn't. It was a bad, not good. Don't recommend it.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that.
No. Well, let's look back to, now we're talking supplements, but let's jump back into the enhanced athletes and their experience. And I think, as we mentioned earlier, there's been this real push towards certainly being more opaque and more transparent in the industry. And hopefully that leads to a kind of a safer use model, for people. What's your experience? And, like when people are getting a coach having to deal with their enhanced experience, what's your experience with it now?
Yeah. So over the years, like I said, I mean, obviously I've been doing this for quite a while now, and I can't sit here and say that I've made every best decision in the world since I started. I started being kind of self-taught, and I taught myself about drugs, but I knew a little bit less about the health side. And then as I've gotten more and more experience, and I've worked with some top individuals in the industry, I've hired mentors. I have a mentor who I work with still to this day, and he's one of the best in the industry in terms of health stuff. And I've learned way more. I realized that there's a way better way to do this. And people, the word you use, safer use model, is what I practice and what I preach. For instance, like first exposures, like we talked about before, there was a friend of mine who had an athlete on a first exposure that ended up leaving him and going to another coach. And all of a sudden he's on 1.5 grams a gear almost, right?
Yeah.
That's astronomical, especially for a young individual to be doing. So for me, it's about minimizing risk over the long term, and listening to the body and very slow escalations and titrations and things, right? Like you read an internet forum, it's going to tell you, well, you should start your first cycle at 500 milligrams of testosterone. What? Excuse me?
Might as well hit it hard. If you're going to hit it, you got to go hard.
100%. And I'm not opposed to even mentioning what I do in terms of dosages and stuff when I start people, because it is safe. You know what I mean? And like I said to you, I'm always going to use this is how I plan things. I'm always going to use a bioidentical hormone, right? So for instance, if a male is hopping on steroids for the first time and going to do his first exposure, well, I'm definitely always going to use a testosterone first, because it's a bioidentical hormone. The body understands how to utilize testosterone. And issues can come from that for sure. Aromatization, gynecomastia, and whatnot. And that's where another problem arises, is people start to get some of these symptoms, and coaches and athletes start hammering drugs. They start just keep pushing your dose, really high, keep running your 500, 700 a gram of this, but let's just put a Band-Aid on it by taking this drug. Well, what they fail to realize is estrogen is also extremely important for heart, brain health, for fat loss, for muscle building. When you start taking a drug that just crushes that estrogen, not only is it going to also limit your progress, it's going to be harmful to your health. Now, we could go into the flip side where these aromatase inhibitors like letrozole, aromasin, arimidex, those things are also going to have very, very, very harsh realities when it comes to the effects on lipids and HDL cholesterol, LDL cholesterols, right? So when you're just putting a drug in to counteract the negative effects of another drug, and it's one thing on top of the other and one thing on top of the other, all of a sudden you end a cycle and there's like grams of shit, and like it's a really, really bad place to be. So for me, like I said, I expose people to one thing at a time, very slowly. And I'll introduce somebody to testosterone, and we'll see how things go. We'll start at a dosage at a TRT level or a replacement therapy level. And then we'll titrate that level up a little bit and see what happens. Okay, great. We're getting some really good results here. We stay there for 4, 6, 7 weeks, however long the body continues to progress for. Okay, now it might be time to titrate things up a little bit more. Now we give them a little bit more. Okay, here's the response. Okay, well, a little bit more over time. Awesome. We're at a really good spot now. We're at about 400 milligrams a week, maybe of this drug. And all of a sudden there's some issues happening. There's some potential sensitive nipples. There's a little bit of gyno. Okay, whoa. We're not going to just start hammering these drugs we talked about.
Right.
Instead, we're going to pull back and we're going to introduce a new drug that'll take you back to your 400 milligram dosage, but a drug that's not going to aromatize the same. So maybe a DHT, like a Primabol and a Masteron, those kind of things, right? So it's very cyclical and thought out in the way we're doing things, not just taking a drug to replace this. So cycle design does matter, and it's very, very important, right? And if you actually look at a spreadsheet and you look at somebody that, for instance, takes 12 weeks of this cycle of 500 milligrams of this drug, 300 milligrams of that drug, 400 milligrams of that drug. So right there, you're at 1200 milligrams, 1.2 grams. So you multiply 1.2 by 12 weeks. Well, you're looking at, what is that? 14 point something, whatever that looks like, 14 grams across 12 weeks, right? Well, if I'm titrating people's dosages very slowly, starting at like 150 or 200 milligrams up to a peak dose, that total milligram dosage that you were able to get to over 12 weeks and have to stop your cycle because either some health stuff happened or that was just your 12-week cycle, I can take people and have their exposures way longer and have them progressing for 5 or 6 months. And I still don't even touch that total milligram dosage that you ended up getting to in 12 weeks.
Right.
And we didn't see nearly the amount of side effects because every time we put something in, the body told us what was happening. And we made an adjustment based on things. Okay, your body doesn't handle that drug well. Let's pull it out. Let's do this one. Right. So it's, again, it all comes back to listening to the body.
Yeah.
And over time, like, people don't need to be exposed to a gram of gear in their first run of steroids. Yeah. You don't need that. If you, quite frankly, I'm a firm believer, if you can't make good results on low amounts of gear or PEDs in your first exposures of usage, you have no business ever using them. Yeah. And that's the reality of it, right? Like, there are non-responders to steroids, just like there's non-responders to a lot of things. And some people progress at genetically different rates.
Yeah.
And
I think that
if you're somebody who's just hammering a lot of drugs because the only way you can progress is a lot of drugs, for me, you ain't the person to work with me, because that's just never going to be the case.
Yeah. I think part of the challenge is everything, we're in this world of, the quick fix, download the program and follow that. And it's just like, I can download my diet, I can download my workout, and I can download a cycle, and I'm just going to do that. And, who knows who wrote that?
100%. And I agree with that. I think one of the biggest problems here is the availability of information. It's been great. It's been great for many things. Like, we're doing a podcast right now where I'm able to express my peace of mind and what I believe is optimal. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be everybody's cup of tea, but I'll tell you right now, that approach is the smart approach to steroid use. And I would argue somebody to the death on that. You will never talk me away from that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to information availability, again, like you said, you can Google first steroid cycle, what should I do?
Yeah.
And I would argue almost every single thing you read will be wrong.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know it. I've seen that stuff, and like, I don't even look at that stuff. And I tell my athletes, do not start Googling things.
Yeah.
I want you to do research on a drug.
Yeah.
And if you want real research, I have hundreds of studies saved of this and that, or even just come to me and ask questions. Sure. Because if you ask me questions, I'll tell you what this does. Yeah. And what you need to look out for and what it can do. But if you just start Googling things, well, you're going to come back to me with so much information, and you're going to think that you need to take 10 times the amount. And that's a problem. When somebody's just so eager to make progress and Google is telling them they need to start their dosage at 500 milligrams, but they're on 200 and they think they need to be making this astronomical process. The number one thing people need to realize in this sport is your best friend is time.
Yeah.
Everything takes time. Building muscle enhanced takes time. Building muscle natural takes more time. Burning fat takes time. None of this stuff happens overnight. And that's where people are, like you said, they want it now. It's like nobody's willing to actually invest over the long term. This isn't a marathon, or this isn't a sprint. This is a marathon. And you need to be willing to invest the time to get from A to Z, and not think you're going from A to Z in your first season of competing. Because I don't know one person that went from an amateur that had never really trained to a pro doing well at the pro level in a year's time. That stuff takes a lot of time.
Well, when and it's funny when you think back to when I was a kid, the only information was, muscle and fitness magazines, and like our goal was to be Ronnie Coleman or Jay Cutler or Arnold Schwarzenegger. And so where we sit mentally is going to obviously be whatever he's doing. And that's the way the magazines presented it.
Yeah.
As long as you do what Arnold's doing, you're going to be like Arnold. Yeah. And so, isn't it kind of natural that we say, look, I'm going to do his workout. I'm going to eat 15,000 calories a day, and I'm going to follow the exact same cycle that he was on. And I'm going to do everything he does, and I'm going to look just like him. Yeah. I don't know. I think we built that into the marketplace long time ago.
And don't get me wrong. Like, I'm also very grateful for social media and everything it's done. Yeah. Like, I wouldn't have the business I do and the impact I'm able to have, which is still not where I want it to be, but obviously it's growing, and that's exciting to me because I am able to get myself and my thoughts out there more, which I believe can help people. Yeah. So I'm very grateful for that. But there's the caveat, right? There's also the flip side of there's a lot of people not putting out good information. And that's where people need to just vouch for themselves and really dive in and think about things. It's funny because I had a conversation with, I'm not sure if you know who Matt, the manager, is. He was like Phil Heath's manager and Jay Cutler's manager.
Okay. Yeah.
He was with Jay for like 20 some years, and they were training partners back in the day and stuff. And we were talking about just that. And he's like, man, it's crazy. I walk into a gym and I see some of these pro bodybuilders, like barely training with any weight and just like stretching and squeezing the muscle. And it's like, there was a point in Jay's career where he trained a little lighter and like less intense because he had the tissue and he needed to manage injury and stuff like that. But you get to a point and it's like, at some point you just need to train heavy and hard. And a lot of people miss the forest for the trees. You know what I mean?
Yep. Oh, it's like, absolutely.
People go in there and again, this doesn't really relate directly to drugs, but it does. But they think they can just take a lot of drugs and train the way they've been training, and all of a sudden they're going to be Jay Cutler. And it's like, well, what you don't realize is Jay Cutler had the best genetics available.
Yeah.
He trained like an animal and did train hard and heavy, especially when he was young and early on in his career. Yeah. And he did use drugs, but he didn't use drugs to get all of those other things where he got to. There was a lot of basic foundation first that then the drugs helped him get to where he was. Yeah. And it's that mindset of, okay, drugs are going to make me a bodybuilder. And I hate seeing it on social media when you see a very good bodybuilder and somebody just comments steroids. And it's like, well, you don't realize that there was a lot more to that than just some steroids, because I know a lot of people that also take steroids that don't look anything like that.
Yeah, no. Yeah. And that's actually, I have several pictures of those people in my phone, because it's, it's a bit of a wake up call to people, I think, too.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. I think it's, I guess I've always struggled with when someone who's purely natural, when they say, oh, if I'm going to bodybuild, do I have to take steroids? And I guess I've always thought, Well, you don't have to. No, you can do
No.
what you're going to do. You're going to get to a certain level, and
Yeah.
and you kind of have to call it a day when you get there, I guess.
Yeah, well, and that's the conversation I have with people, right? You got to be a realist. And I say to people, okay, what is your goal? Because if your goal is to be on an Olympia stage and actually be a competitive pro bodybuilder,
totally.
Well, I'm going to tell you to your face with 100% truth and certainty, you are going to need to use performance enhancing drugs.
Sure. Yeah.
But if you tell me that your goal is just to be a good bodybuilder, but you would prefer to be natural, well, in the natural side of things, you can be damn good. But there comes a point, and like yourself, you just missed out on a natural pro card.
Yeah.
I don't think you're naive enough to know that you would think you're stepping on a Mr. Olympia men's physique stage as a natural athlete. You know what I mean? Like you understand that. You want it, your goal is that natural pro card, and then you can go to some natural pro shows maybe. But you're not going to try to step up there with the guys who are enhanced, because at the end of the day, I don't care how good you look. Yeah, you're going to get smoked.
Yeah. And and the other, like, not that I don't want this to sound like a cop out, but everyone always, you get all these Instagram people, they say, oh, well, you can do anything you want, anything in this world, you can be anything you want. And it's like, you know what? The clock's ticking for some of us. Like we're not all going to be, like even if I said, hey, listen, I'm going to go and compete against Jay Cutler, whoever's on stage today, or Plowman. I don't have time for that. Like I'm just, at my age, I'm not going to put on 20 or 30 pounds of pure muscle. Like I just have that misconception.
You have to be a realist too, right? Like when someone says you can be anything you want, I believe that we are our makers, but there is a limit. Like if you come to me and say you're going to stay natural, but you're going to be a Mr. Olympia, I am going to laugh at you, and I'm going to say, okay, well, you can be anything you want but that, because that's not that's not true. You could never be that. It's genetically and it's an inhumane to become 260 pounds of pure muscle mass with that shape, that structure, and that lean. It's actually impossible. I'm sorry you couldn't do it. I don't care. There's not a person in the world who could do that.
Yeah, no. I got to plug in half sec.
Yeah.
We'll go. Sorry. No, you're absolutely right. Like, I guess, I've always wondered too, and there's been this kind of conversation online. I don't know, you probably hear Eric Helms and all these guys talking about
EMJ.
Yeah. And when they talk about the fat-free mass index and how, there's quite a few studies actually that show that, past about 25, and there's going to be genetic anomalies, but past the 25 of that number, of that indice, that you're really, it's questionable if the human body can do that without enhancements at all.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I'm up in that zone. I'm getting I'm right on it at this point, and I feel like, now what? Now how do I get,
especially in our day and age, right? Because you can talk about studies, and another thing is it's literally proven now that like men at 40 plus years of age, the level of testosterone they have in comparison to 50 years ago is drastically different. And that's why I say to a lot of people, and this is something that I stand firmly behind too, a lot of people are like, well, like, is it really the worst thing in the world that I have to cruise for the rest of my life? And I'm like, that's a decision for you to make. I've made my peace, because I already know that more than likely, based on our environment and the generation I grew up in, by 40 years of age, I probably would need TRT anyways.
Yeah.
And my father, I've put my father on TRT. I had him get his testosterone checked, and he's not an unhealthy man.
Yeah.
His stuff got checked and it was very low. Right. And like,
what do you think causes that? Like, what's the environmental shift that caused that? Like, best guess.
There's a million things, right? Yeah. Like it's pollution, it's pesticides and products in our foods that we're eating. It's a lot more processed foods. Like, think about it, right? Back in the day, you go back 50, 100 years ago, well, there was not any of these products on a shelf that are on the shelf now. It was vegetables, meats, grains, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And now the whole world has just shifted, and like, there's so many different things, stress levels, right? Like different jobs and people in different industries with higher stress levels, working this whole thing. Like, people have this predisposition to thinking like, all work, no sleep, go hard, go hard, go hard. And it's like, well, I mean, go ahead, but you're going to be a lot more effective if you actually prioritize your sleep. I promise you that. And I'm somebody myself who works very long hours, but sleep is very important. So you always are going to have 6 to 8 hours to get a sleep in. I don't care who you are. The most productive people in the world are still sleeping.
I thought it was funny that Arnold had that kind of famous saying of, you have to sleep faster, and it's like, and he came from a generation where the thinking at that point was you burn more calories while you're awake. So if you can stay awake longer, then you can burn more calories. But I think we've since shown that maybe you just don't eat the last 100 calories and in the same spot, get a better sleep.
Studies will show you the less you sleep, the more you are to hold on to body fat, right? Because you're literally, that's why, okay, well, people may pay attention to this after I say it, but a night after you have a very, very shitty sleep, you'll probably have more cravings for other foods, and your decision making is poor. So you may make the decision to grab that other food. Your hunger signaling is off. So there's a bunch of different things that contribute to that. And then at the end of the day, your cortisol is elevated. Your cortisol patterning is off. If your cortisol patterning is off, your body is not in a position to handle foods the same way. If your blood glucose is naturally higher from the stress levels in your body, you're not going to handle your nutrients the same way. So you're literally set up for less optimal results.
Does sleep affect leptin levels?
Oh yeah, ghrelin, leptin and stuff like, and it's more over like prolonged periods, right? That's the overall trends. I mean, at the end of the day, any type of massive stressor will have an effect on most of your hormones, right? So hunger signaling is an interesting one because again, it can be changed and adapted and adjusted simply by frequency of meals even and stuff like that. I see it all the time when I start working with a new athlete who maybe had things fairly poorly optimized, or they were somebody who may have been doing some sort of like intermittent fasting. And it's like, well, no, I'm going to be feeding you 5 times a day. And I mean, you're not going to be hungry for the first while. And they're like, well, I'm never going to be hungry. This is just how I perform best. Or people that just don't have breakfast until noon because they think they're so busy in the morning that all they have time for is a coffee and 5 coffees. And it's like, well, no, I'm going to force you to eat breakfast for the next 2 months. And eventually your body will tell you it's time to eat breakfast and you'll have that signaling.
Is that, is the other part of that, of the constant meal, is that part of managing insulin as well? Is that
absolutely. And I mean, not necessarily as much managing insulin. I think it's more so maximizing muscle protein synthesis. Because you can spike muscle protein synthesis every like 3 to 4 hours, right? And it can only be maximized so much. Like eating 100 grams of protein in one sitting, people have this thing where they say you're not going to absorb some of that protein. You will absorb that protein. But I mean, if you had a one feeding of 100 grams of protein a day, well, you've only maximized your muscle protein synthesis once per day. Versus if you have that split into multiple servings, and 100 isn't it's not a good number to use because I don't believe 20 grams of protein is enough to maximize muscle protein synthesis. I think it's more along the lines of like 30 and X amount of leucine or whatever. But with that being said, the more frequent feedings, the more you can maximize muscle protein synthesis. And again, I think people split hairs here too much. Like, do you need 6 meals? No. Do you need 2 meals? Well, that's not going to be enough. I think that 4 to 6 range, if you're having 4 to 6, I like 5 because I am a guy that does the pre and post workout nutrition, right? With higher absorbing, higher digestion foods. So if you're having only 4 meals a day, well, if you're eating 2 within a 3-hour window of pre and post workout, you have a long period of time to only have 2 other meals through the day, right? So
that makes sense.
There's always ways to play around with it. And again, for me, it comes back to digestion. People also say that you need 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. I drive that a lot higher for most people, as long as their digestion can handle it. I would say at the very least, probably 1 gram for building muscle. I know there's studies will show other, but I think there's a lot of value in anecdote too. And I've seen anecdote prove some value elsewhere. But yeah, I think it's realistically, I'm a huge believer in high protein, and you should be maximizing how much protein you're eating as long as it's not disturbing digestion.
I remember hearing Jay Cutler say that he used to he'd get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to pee, and he'd have a protein shake in his bathroom, and he'd drink that at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, man, when I was my biggest, I would set an alarm, and I would have a full blown same thing, a meal, but it was a shake. It would oatmeal, almond butter, and whey isolate right beside my bed. I would literally have an alarm go off at like 3 a.m. I'd bang my shake, and I'd go back to bed. Again, is it optimal? No, but I've always been the type of guy myself who eating is a struggle for me. Because I was eating upwards of 5,000 calories towards 6,000 calories, right? And like that's really, really hard for me to do. So even my coach at the time had to put like I don't recommend people do this unless you are this type of person. Like all of my meals, I was having Nutri-Grain bars with. Just to get extra calories in, and they tasted great, so it was satiable, right? On the flip side, every one of my meals outside of like that pre-workout window was like pasta, because I just needed large amounts of carbs. Like when somebody signs up with me and they're eating 2,000 calories, the last thing I'm giving them is pasta all day every day. You know what I mean? So it really comes down to the person, and for me it was just, and if I missed a meal at that point, I'd wake up 4 pounds lighter.
Oh, wow.
And I had no more room to put extra calories in my meals, because I felt like I was going to puke after my meals already. So the only place to get those calories in was literally, okay, well, you're going to have a meal before you go to bed, and then you're going to wake up and you're going to have a shake.
Right. Yeah. Can you imagine doing intermittent fasting and, limiting yourself to 2 meals and then trying to ram 2,500 calories in per meal?
I've done it. I've done it. Actually, I did it. I've done intermittent fasting a few times. I did it when I was very uneducated, and I just thought it was going to get me shredded. And then I've done keto. I've done every diet you can think of. That's why I've done a lot of research on them. I actually did intermittent fasting for a small period last year because I was just so busy, and I wasn't necessarily trying to grow at that point. And it was really tough. My stomach shrunk drastically too. So reversing out of that to try to get more calories in. And that's why I got out of it. I got to a point where I'm like, okay, I need to ramp things up a little bit. I want to start growing a little bit more. I want to put more calories in. And in a small window like that, in an 8-hour window or a 6-hour window, it's almost impossible. Right?
That was tough.
Yeah, it was very tough. And I was basically, because the other thing is, well, if you're intermittent fasting and you're training, I'm definitely not ever training fasted. I'll tell you that much.
Right.
I'm also definitely not ever training and then not having a meal afterwards. You have to time it so that you eat and then you train in between your meals. So if you train for 2 hours, you've just lost 2 hours of your eating window right there.
Right.
So that eating window becomes even smaller. It's definitely far from optimal, I would say, in terms of physique development. There's health benefits for sure. Especially if you're talking like gut health. But again, intermittent fasting, people think it's just this amazing thing that it's so anti-inflammatory, and it's very not stressful on the body. Actually, it's a stressor on your body. Fasting is a stress. Fasting is stress on the body for sure.
I've seen a fair number of studies that say if you equate for calories, that intermittent fasting doesn't really improve your.
It doesn't at all.
It doesn't.
And that's what I was meaning when I said I was very uneducated when I first started this journey, thinking that it helps you get lean. It doesn't. Normally, the reason people lose weight on an intermittent fasting style diet is because they are actually consuming less per day, because the time limit is restricted. When people are normally eating junk all day and they equate that to 3,000 calories, and then they're like, okay, I'm going to eat healthy and I'm going to intermittent fast. Well, if you're eating healthy and you're intermittent fasting, I promise you most average day people are not getting 3,000 calories in a 6-8 hour window. It's not happening.
No.
So all of a sudden you went from a 3,000 calorie day to a 2,000, and you're exercising. Magic. Yeah. You lost 20 pounds in 6 weeks. Awesome.
I've had numerous people come up to me in the gym. It always happens as you're cutting, of course, because then you're more noticeable, and people come up and they're like, oh my goodness, how do I lose weight? I got to get rid of this. And they always put their hand on their distended abdomen. And I always say, well, like, you need to stop eating so much. And then, oh no, that's not healthy. And then suddenly, and then suddenly I'd say, like, skip a meal or something, do something like, and everyone's like, that's not healthy. And then suddenly science calls it intermittent fasting. And I'm like,
Well, and it's funny too, right? Like at the end of the day, I tell people this all the time. You can want it or you can want it, right? And like people ask me, how can I lose weight? Well, what does your diet look like? Oh, I eat this amount of pasta every night for dinner. I go to Subway for lunch. I go to here and there. And it's like, okay, perfect. Awesome. Let's cut out the pasta for dinner and let's have a steak and salad. Oh no, I need my pasta. I love pasta too much. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
You're not going to lose weight then.
No.
Oh, you can't cut out your full sugar pops. Oh, okay. You're probably not going to lose weight then. So you asked me a question you wanted an answer to, and I've given you an answer, but you think there's an easier shortcut to getting that because you can't change your lifestyle. And that's what it comes down to with a lot of things. When I deal with females that are going through hormonal issues, or people that just have messed up cortisol patterning, or people that are trying to lose weight, whatever it is, 90% of the time, the answer isn't supplements. The answer isn't this XYZ. The answer is you need to make a lifestyle change.
Yeah.
That lifestyle change might be minimizing your stressors. That lifestyle change might be leaving a toxic relationship or a job, because that cortisol and that stress is literally putting you in a position you can't get where you need to in your life. Right. And there's just so many of these things that overlap, and people always reach for the supplement. Like, oh, I'm going to take some ashwagandha because I'm stressed out. But you're going to keep going back to the same place every day that's stressing you the hell out. Well, sorry, that supplement ain't going to work. You need to work on you. You need to do some meditation. You need to do some belly breathing. You need to fix your stress first, and then we'll rely on the supplements to add on top of that. It's called a supplement for a reason.
Yeah.
A supplement, not to fix everything and anything.
Yeah. Now, of course, in our, we're going to fix everything this month or this week type of world we're in, it's tough. And, you talk to people and they've spent 20 or 30 or 40 years getting fat.
Yeah.
And then they want to fix that in a month. And it's just, wow, you could probably just reverse the cycle. And then, 20 years from now, you'll be to where you want to be. But yeah, and
it's really easy. Like from where I sit, there's a reason why, like for me, when people try to sign up with me for coaching, you can't just go to my website and pay for coaching to be a Team Miller Elite athlete. You can't do that. There's a lot of teams that do have that, where you just go to the website, here's the prices, here's a checkout link. That person gets an email when you paid, then they talk to you and you go about your way. For me, I don't have that, because I like having conversations like you and I are right now, face to face with people on Zoom or Google Meets or something, to learn who the person is, because I can tell with people pretty quickly whether they are looking for just a quick fix and aren't willing to change their life to get the results, or if they're just actually willing to make a change to get where they want to be. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't want to work with people that just want a shortcut, because those are the people that end up abusing drugs or X, Y, and Z to get where they want to be. And like, at the end of the day, you can't remove hard work from the equation. There is some sort of sacrifice and effort always going to be needed to get to what you want, right? Like there's always a reaction to an action, and there's always a sacrifice for a benefit. Yeah,
there's the whole that brings up the sustainability of what you're doing. And like if everything's just a flat out a sprint versus the marathon, as you said, well, then you can't sprint forever.
No, 100%.
And something's going to happen at the end.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Exactly it.
Yeah, I've been there a little bit too. I had my first show, I dropped a lot of weight but then it became sustaresultable. It was good. Like, something worked.
Yep.
So like, I think I came down 40.
You see the results.
Yeah.
And you get proud of what you've accomplished.
Yeah.
And then it's like, you almost get addicted to that. And it's like, wow, this is awesome. I really like what I'm seeing right now. I'm proud of this. Whereas some people, they don't have that, right? It's like, okay, I did it. And then they're also just okay with going back to their status quo. And like, that's why for me and my brand and my team, like, our saying behind us is mediocrity is a curse. Mm-hmm. Because as far as I'm concerned, it is. If you're okay with being mediocre your whole life, well, I don't want to work with you, because I don't want people who are just trying to blend in and be mediocre. I want to work with people that want to create change and be elite. And that's cool. I respect that a lot.
Yeah. There's a book, I can't remember the author, Good to Great.
Yeah.
And basically, it says exactly that good gets in the way of great.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
A lot of people land there, so it's tough. Yeah. What would you, like, someone new, and like, I don't know, I hate to call it the industry. We got to find a different word for it.
Yeah.
But whatever it is that we do, someone's new to it and they're excited about it. What's the advice you give someone who's, they're probably not in terrible shape and they want to do something, they want to get into this, and what's the advice you lay on those people?
Get a coach, for one.
Yeah.
And somebody to guide you, and do your research on that coach. Ask questions, sit down with them face to face. before you even sit down with them, do your own research, have a couple people, interview a few people, find out who you're going to mesh with the best, and be realistic with your goals. I think that's a big one. And I think setting goals is extremely important. But again, being realistic, right? If you have 150 pounds to lose, your goal shouldn't be to step on stage in 6 months, right? Like, and that's just the fact of the matter. So I think you have to be realistic with that. Yeah. And honestly, this one is just, it sounds so basic. Be willing to work hard. Because if you're not willing to work hard, good shit's just not going to happen. You have to be willing to work for the things that are going to come to you. And anything worth having is not going to be easy to get. And anything that's easy to get is not going to be worth having. Right. Yeah. So that's something that I believe I stand truly behind. And I tell it to all my athletes, and I tell it when I'm watching training videos and I feel like people are leaving reps on the table or they're selling themselves short. And it's like, listen, there is somebody out there that you are going to be competing against right now, training a lot harder than you. Yeah. And at the end of the day, if you stand beside them and they beat you, you're going to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and you're going to be able to say, I did not do everything I could have to win this show. Yeah. Versus if you truly get in the gym every day, and I'm not talking just the gym, like with your diet, you're not messing up everything and whatever, and you can check every box and you can stack those wins as much as possible, you're going to be good and you're going to be moving in the right direction. So hold yourself accountable, check those boxes daily, whether that's your water intake, your diet. I'm not saying you can never take the losses or screw ups, but make sure you're trending upwards and you're winning a lot more than those losses are happening, right? Because if at the end of the day, you look back at your week and 2-3 days out of your week, you had a very poor sleep, you messed up your diet 4 times, you skipped your cardio, but you had 3 or 4 good days, it's like, well, somebody's out there having 5 or 6 good days. So time to ramp it up a notch. Yeah.
I was talking to a lady today, and I guess there's kind of a bit of the other side where you think you're competing against you at some levels. I don't super buy I think you're always competing against other people, but if you want to be the best you that you can be, and that's a reasonable goal too. And I was just saying to her, like, don't get on stage this time anyways, to win necessarily. You're like, it's good. Like if it's their goal and that's your time and, you're going to say that that's your target, that's great. But don't beat yourself up if you're not first place. Like it's a progress.
I actually have mixed feelings about that. And I'll express where I'm coming from. So I think there's a lot of value in a first-time competitor getting up there just to see if they enjoy the sport. Yeah. This is something they want to do long-term. Now, if you come to me and you tell me that you want to win, and I look at your physique and you're like, I want to win and I want to do a show in 6 months or 8 months. And I look at your physique and I'm like, you need 2 years of off season before you're actually going to win. Right. Well, I'm going to tell you that. And I actually have a lot of athletes right now who wanted to compete this year. And I said no, because they told me they want to be pros. They want to win shows. And I'm like, well, if your goal is to do well at the national level, you need a physique that's ready to do well at the national level first. You don't pick a show and try to build a physique for the show. You build a physique and pick a show based on when the physique is ready, because you can't dictate how that's going to happen. Right. So I think that's very, very important. And I think, I love bodybuilding so much to the fact that, and this is just my personal opinion, I think there needs to be a category or a federation, and I think there is, that people that are just doing like their whole fat loss journey and they're just up there to display their fat loss journey go to. But it's really like, if somebody is pushing the envelope and training their ass off for 20, 24 weeks, whatever it is for a prep, they shouldn't be standing beside somebody who literally just tried to lose 50 pounds and has a bunch of like, you know what I mean? And a bunch more to lose. They're not in condition. This isn't literally a weight loss competition. It's a bodybuilding show, no matter what category you're in. And I don't say that to push people away, but I say that because we want better and better and better and better athletes. We want to grow the sport of bodybuilding. The sport of bodybuilding doesn't grow by a bunch of people that just lost 20 pounds and step on stage. Right. Like, you deserve credit for that 100%. And I will always give you credit, because there's a lot of people in this world that are complacent to the fact they won't even do that. So good for you. If you feel good and you look good and you're happy, awesome. but don't get on a bodybuilding stage, because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, your confidence will get shot when
Right.
you're standing beside people actually shredded and you have
Yeah.
another 30 weeks of dieting to even get a sniff of lean.
Yeah. It's a
Right.
big wake up call. That's a big wake up call when that
100%.
happens.
But and I've seen it kick people in the ass for sure too. But that's where I'm going with this. If you just want to figure out if bodybuilding's for you, yeah, do a show. But like for me, most people come to me and they're like, I want to win and I want to do this. And it's like, okay, you're taking a 2-year off season. And
Yeah.
I've dropped athletes and whatnot, because I've had athletes on stage and I tell them after they get off stage, like, hey, if you want to be competitive in this show, like the next time you compete, you need a 1.5 years of actual growth, because doing this show and starting a prep in 6 months, you're not going to have the muscle you need to win.
Right.
And some people can't handle that. That's the fact of the matter. I don't sugarcoat shit with people, and some people can't handle that. And just last year I had it happen, and I'm okay with it, because I know that athlete, when they do a show this year, and they won't be under me, I'm going to see them and they're going to look the same. And that's okay. If they're okay with looking the same, but mentally don't tell me that you want to improve and you want to win and you want to be a better athlete, but then not be willing to do the stuff that is going to make you a better athlete. And that doesn't mean stepping on stage more frequently. That actually means spending more time away from the stage, uncomfortable, eating all the food, having a little bit higher levels of body fat, growing the muscle, because the dieting part, quite frankly, is actually pretty easy. It's force feeding yourself for 18 or 24 months. That becomes very, very hard. And that's where champions are made realistically, right? Like, you know what I mean? All these pros didn't become pros and the best pros in the world from competing every 6 months. No. Some of them got very large over very large periods of time, eating enormous amounts of food to get to where they are. Yeah. And it also creates a better prep setting in terms of, okay, a good reverse diet. Okay, we've built your metabolic rate up through the off season so that when we diet you, you're at a good level of body fat, but you have a lot of tools in the toolbox in terms of calories are very high. So you're not starting a prep at 2,000 calories, 400 calories or 300 calories once, and you're at 1,700. And then all of a sudden you're at 1,400. And it's like, okay, now things are getting really low. We've only pulled your food twice and there's nowhere else to go. Right.
Yeah. I guess for me, like my psychology is simply, I go to win. I'm there to win, not to even come second.
100%. So, and that's who I am too. And I don't have an ability to turn that off. I genuinely don't. Like, don't get me wrong. When I have an athlete in a competitive show, I will 100% shake their hand and say, great work on second place when they get second of 10 people, whatever. That's awesome. That's an accomplishment, but it's not the job we came here to do. And you better believe I'm pissed off and I'm going back to the drawing board. I'm looking at what we could have done to make you win first, because next time you get up here, I want first place. And if that means you got second and you were this close, then maybe we can prep for a show in 2 months. Right. But if you were a little bit more than this close and you're like this far away from first place, we're going to take the time and I'm going to hold you away from the stage. And if you can't do that, you're probably not going to work with me, because that's actually what it's going to take to be first place. Yeah.
I think what you said was good too, in that, it's always good to have dates and goals and stuff, regardless of where you're starting or where you're headed. I think having realistic goals is really where where it really hits home.
And that's where I say to everyone, and I mentioned this a few minutes ago, I have really transitioned from, instead of people coming to me and saying, okay, I want to do this show, here's our timeline, we're going to do this show. My response to them is, nope, we're going to see if you're ready to do that show. We're going to diet you and get your physique in a place where now we can say, okay, this show is 14 weeks out. You're at really good body fat. We have a lot more food. We've already in a fat loss phase. Yeah. What we have to do is push this further. If you're enhanced, we'll start using some PEDs at this time and plan this all out. But we build the physique and then choose the show. Right. We don't choose a show and try to fit that physique into the show, because that creates a lot more stress. You're on a timeline. It makes you to make irrational decisions in terms of drastic food drops, crazy drug usage in some people, you know what I mean? And it's like, no, that's not how I'm doing things. We're going to build a physique and then choose a show. And when your physique is ready, we will know, and it will tell us.
Yeah. I think that's a tough part. You're really in it. I think where it plays out poorly, and you're kind of implying it, is that people get to a point where they realize, I need to lose way more weight than I'm prepared for. And then suddenly they're going into like 0 calorie days, or they're going into extremes, and that's not good for anything.
Yeah. And like, I'm going to be honest and just say this, like, and I'm somebody who says this because I'm also somebody who preaches fixing this. if you want to be a good bodybuilder, most of the time, there is going to be some extreme stuff that has to happen, right? Like, especially for bikini athletes, for one, everyone's like so scared of like, oh my God, she was eating 800 calories in the final month of her show. Well, yeah, she's 105 pounds trying to get to an extreme low level of body fat. She's probably going to need to do that. Now, the problem is she's going to have probably really big thyroid dysfunction afterwards. She's going to have some sort of estrogen dominance. If you don't know how to fix that, well, you should never be taking somebody there.
Right. Yeah.
For myself, the only reason I've became educated on this stuff is because I know this stuff happens. I didn't become educated on this stuff because I love working on estrogen dominance cases and I just want to fix everybody in that case. Sorry, no, that's not. If you're somebody that comes to me and you just have that and you want me to fix it, normally I'll pass you off to somebody that I know that can fix it, that is passionate about doing that. My passion is bodybuilding, and I learned this stuff because I want to be able to fix it when it does happen. Because if you are pushing yourself to the extreme, because this is an extreme sport, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And we want to be able to get out of there as fast as possible and fix you as fast as possible. Now, does that say it happens every time? No, but I would say like 90% of the time that a female is actually in shape for a show, like actually at low enough body fat that would be successful at a pro level or a national level, they're going to lose their period. That stuff is going to happen. And if they're not, they're probably not lean enough. Right. And that's just the fact of the matter. So as long as that stuff can be taken care of after the fact, then it's all good. If somebody's pushing people to these places and they have no idea how to fix this, or they're not helping people with reverse diet and they're not fixing these problems they create, as far as I'm concerned, get out of here. Don't even help anybody, because you're the problem.
Yeah, it's really pretty easy to tell someone not to eat much.
100%.
That's all they're doing. Stop eating so much.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then just cut out all the carbs, and you look like a magician, but you've made a big mess.
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly it. And I see it all the time. It's unfortunate, but I mean, like you said, it is an extreme sport. Nobody here is perfect, and we all have to push the envelope with certain things, whether that's diet or whatever. Obviously mitigating risk. If we're talking drugs, it's not pushing the envelope a bunch there.
Yeah.
Know what you're doing to the point that you can reverse anything that you create.
Right.
And if you can't do it, then maybe just don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny too, because people fall in love with it too. And then we've seen, you know who I'm talking about. There's a few guys that will be on stage until they die. Like they're going to be 90 years old up there.
100%. Exactly. I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, it's pretty great. It's great that, you know, people do fall in love with the sport. There's a, I don't know what it is. It's just that vibe of being up there and doing your thing. And yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Absolutely.
So, you must miss it. Or do you get it through your athletes? That's secondhand.
Bodybuilding, and I absolutely miss it. I'll never deny that. And there's no saying I'll never be up there again, to be completely honest with you. I would have to, there's going to be extreme precautions if I ever decide to, because of my health and so forth. I definitely wouldn't do the stuff I had done in the past to get to where I was. And there's also a mental barrier for me, knowing that I will never be as big as I once was. But and that's a really tough thing. You know, I know where I was, and it's like, why do it again when you can't be there again, when you know what you were capable of at one time? But I love it so much. There might be a point in my life where I say, yeah, you know what, let's swing the bat again. My athletes always come first, though. I would make sure I was never sacrificing that, because I just love bodybuilding. And for me, I live vicariously through them. When I see them winning, like I said, there was no feeling like the first pro card I won with Maverick. That was one of the coolest things I've ever experienced. And seeing how happy he was, and like, fuck, it was cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it was funny too when I was up there doing the MC work, because I was like real close to the athletes, you know. And you know, you see everything when you're that close. And then I'm like intentionally delaying saying who the winner is, and you could see the athletes, like you could see them going through these mental shifts on stage, just like vibrating. Am I the winner? Am I the winner? And then, you know, I guess the downside is, you know, a lot of people who thought they would win, you get to see that up close too, where they thought, oh, I should have had that spot and I didn't take it. And you see the anguish, and, you know, oh, I did all this work.
Guys like me in the stands who are just sitting there like, come on.
Yep. Yeah. So that was fun. It was fun to watch it up close and personal, and just see you see a lot of things happen on stage too. I thought was really interesting, where I think you don't see it from 50 feet away, like how much shaking is actually going on.
Oh, for sure.
Because you're just far enough away, you can't really visually grasp how much shaking happens on stage.
I will say with that too, I think that's a lot of entry level
Oh yeah, 100%.
where
Yeah.
people, like, you go to a national show and that stuff's limited because
Yeah.
you're getting docked on that.
Right. Yeah.
Which I will say with Pat, that's an area that he drastically improved. And I know he was working on it religiously because we had a posing coach that was working with him, and I was making sure he was posing lots. He was a statue up there. He didn't move. He hit his poses and he just didn't move. And like that attracts attention.
Right.
When you're shaking and things are moving, well, that's negative attention. When you're just a statue and everybody around you is shaking, the judges look at you and they're like, that guy's practiced what he's what he knows what he's doing.
What causes it? Do you think, is that over contraction, or is that?
Sure, that's one thing, and under experience. I think people don't pose enough going into their shows, right? I have my athletes pose for 30-45 minutes a day for 6 weeks going into a show.
Wow.
And you better be like, your cardio is just as, or your posing is just as important as your cardio. I want you spending the time doing that, because you shouldn't have to think on stage. But I would agree,
right?
A muscle that's contracted at like 85 or 90%, a lot of the times is going to look the same as a muscle that's contracted at 100%.
Right.
And I also think it's people trying to make up for lack of muscle by squeezing a muscle harder. When you have a very mature, dense muscle and you've built a good amount of muscle, you don't have to actually squeeze it that hard to display it. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah. Especially when
you look at that, and you look at those Olympia pros, and they're just like, they hit a pose and it's just like literally locked in, and they're not even really posing that hard. Like, yes, they are squeezing things, but they can hold it all day because, well, they're squeezing at about 70%, and there's so much muscle there that it's shown.
Yeah. Do you we kind of glazed over it, but do you do fasted cardio? Is that a good thing, or where do you sit on fasted?
So if it's a, I mean, I do believe in it for sure. I think that's one thing where studies will tell you that there is no difference between fasted or fed cardio. Anecdotally, I will tell you I've seen differences, but there is one caveat here. Fasted cardio for an enhanced person is a lot different than fasted cardio for, because there are drugs that will actually increase fat burning in a fasted state. Growth hormone is one of them. If you apply your growth hormone like 3 hours before your fasted cardio, so you'd have to take it in the middle of the night, or you absolutely will have greater levels of lipolysis happening while you're doing your fasted cardio.
Right.
There's other drugs that work really well in a fasted state. Your yohimbines, clenbuterols, these things are all gonna, you know what I mean, drive lipolysis. With that being said, is it a huge difference? No. For me, I just like making sure that I have a different approach to cardio, that it's kind of a higher intensity approach. And I want you to be able to put 100% into your cardio and 100% into your training. So if you're doing your cardio post training, but you've put 100% into your training, your output capacity is going to be lower post training. If you wake up in the morning, have a small cup of coffee or something and get on your cardio, well, your output capacity is going to be a lot harder than post training, because you have more energy in the tank, right? And then you get a bunch of meals in you through the day. Now you train in the evening. Right. So I think that's what matters more, but it also comes a convenience standpoint. Where do people have time? But at the end of the day, if I'm working with an enhanced competitor, and we're probably doing at some point, for a lot of people, it might be cardio twice a day. And at that point, yeah, your time is important, but you also told me you want to win a pro card. So I really don't care. Find a way to get it done.
Yeah. Wait, right? Do you ascribe to the like, you know, kind of a top of 2 pounds a week weight loss, or is that a?
No, I base it on the look. You know what I mean? Like, if there's a lot of body fat to lose, I don't care if someone's dropping 4 pounds a week. If there's a very low amount of body fat to lose, like a very low, and we're like a couple weeks out, well, yeah, I might try to slow things down with refeeds or decrease cardio, stuff like that. Because at that point, if you're dropping 5 pounds a week and you're at 6% body fat, well, that's a large percentage of muscle you're probably losing at that point, right? So it really depends. But yeah, that's totally dependent on where the person is, how much body fat the person has, how much water they hold, and their fluctuations from night to morning in terms of water intake and fluid flushing and stuff like that.
Yeah. I've always liked fasted cardio. I've been a fan, I guess, but
Yeah,
I'm
well,
also a fan.
I partially like it because I feel like people just feel better during the day, right?
Yeah.
And most people you talk to, yeah, it might suck getting up early for your cardio for 30 minutes in the morning. Once you get it done, you feel amazing.
Yeah.
And again, I would say I have seen anecdotally, even in natural athletes, it work better than fed cardio. And I think yeah, studies might show different, but I think anecdote does have some value. And I can't tell you exactly why. I mean, at the end of the day, sure, yeah, glycogen stores are probably depleted and this and that, but it just doesn't make sense via the data that's shown. But at the same time, it does make sense to me. So I'll probably never just abandon that.
I think it's hard in the science though to like manage the psychology of things.
For sure. And like I actually had a conversation the other day with a really good friend of mine who's a really respected coach in the US. And we were talking about just this. The science only says so much. There is not enough research about every variable stacked on top of each other, because we have studies on this thing, we have studies on this thing, and we have studies on this thing. But when we're bodybuilding, we're combining that thing, that thing, that thing, that thing, and that thing. And this variable affects that variable affects this variable. Now you stack all those variables together. There is no study on that because that thing can be affecting that. And it goes right back to the fast cardio thing you just mentioned. Well, if you're telling me that if you're going to go black and white and say that fasted cardio is no better than fed cardio, well, I'm going to come back to you and say, well, how about if I put 4 units of growth hormone in 3 hours before their fasted cardio? I know for a fact, and I promise you, fat burning will be higher in a fasted state. So how can you say black and white, fasted or fed is the same as fasted, right? And it's just, there's so many moving parts all the time. And it gets even more complex when you're talking PEDs, because every drug or every study on every drug is done individually on that drug. Well, what if we have 4 other drugs in the equation, like a lot of bodybuilders do in the final stages of a contest prep? Everything says, don't ever do this. Well, I did this and this happened and health was great and nothing bad happened because we had this, and this in place. You know what I mean? And like, there are boundaries you need to respect. And it goes back to that safer use model and minimizing risk. But again, at the end of the day, I think it's also apparent that if you're working with somebody who has potential to be an Olympia level athlete, the athlete knows and the coach knows that there are going to be greater risks than working with somebody that's doing a regional show for their first time.
Sure.
Right. And you 100%. Get to that point that you have those conversations and you make sure, hey, we're going to probably have to do some things here that are going to be like full gas. And it's not the healthiest, safest thing to do. But if that's where you want to end up, we need to know that you're okay with that. I'm going to minimize risk as much as possible on my end. And we're going to do what we can to kind of make our way around that.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. So, well, listen, I worked out this morning before the podcast, and I got to go eat some food.
I'm starving. Well, I actually got to head to the gym here too. So let's.
So when do I see you next? You're going to be up at the TNT, or
I will absolutely be at TNT. Yeah,
Naturals.
I'll be at the Naturals as well.
Which one's at the end of June? Is that the
Naturals? Is the I'm gonna pull up my show schedule here, but TNT is before Naturals.
Okay, so end of June. Okay.
Yeah.
June 25th.
The actual June 24th, 25th is or June 25th is TNT, and then the Naturals is July 23rd.
Okay. Well, I'll try to get up there. That'll be fun. So
yeah, that'd be awesome to see you.
Cool. Yeah, good to see you. Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Hopefully, 100%. Thank you very much for having me. I absolutely appreciate it. These opportunities are cool for me to just kind of speak and show my peace of mind.
Yeah, hopefully all the training goes well with your athletes coming up to the next shows, and Patrick does great. We'll watch that. That'll be
on pace right now for everybody to look pretty good. So
it's awesome.
Pressure's on me to not screw this one up.
Yeah, don't mess it up, man. If he does poorly, it's all you.
Yeah.
All right.
We're all good there. I think we'll have some fun and have a good show.
For sure. Yeah, I look forward to seeing that.
We'll surely pick up in the next week. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, you bet. Awesome. All right, sir. Well, we'll catch up to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for your time. Much appreciated.
Awesome. I appreciate you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Talk soon.
That meal.
All right. Thanks.
Cheers.
All right. Bye for now.